The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. Boy, it's an exciting morning, lots going on. We have a lot of really exciting things to talk about today, and we're going to be with you for the next 3 hours live, talking about topics having to do with autism and autism spectrum disorder and how we can be more efficient, more effective working with our children who are on the autism spectrum. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a practitioner, we know how important that is to you to be effective working with the kids that are in your life that you care about so deeply. And we also know that it's an overwhelming thing, right? You've got so many other things on your plate, and now autism has shown up, whether you're a teacher and you had an expectation of what you were going to teach, and now you have a child who's on the spectrum, whether you're a parent who had an expectation of what things were going to be like, and now they're very different. There's a lot to learn. Well, we talk about ABA here, Applied Behavior Analysis. We talk about a lot of things having to do with autism, but one of the cornerstones of what we talk about is ABA, and there's a really good reason for that, because we know that ABA is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. We know that it is effective with all of our kids in that we can see progress no matter where the child is on the spectrum, no matter what their age is. If we apply the principles of ABA in a consistent manner, and if we do enough of it, we're going to see progress. That's the name of the game, right? What we all want to see. We don't know outcomes, and nobody can promise outcomes, because all of our children come with a different set of circumstances, a different set of symptoms, different things that they react to, right? And we all have different circumstances. So where we end up is going to be different with every child, just because they're all different, and we have to honor that. However, we're going to make progress, and that's, as I said, the name of the game. Since we talk about ABA a lot, you would think that they would have had somebody host this show who's an expert in ABA. No, that would be off. Far too easy, right? And honestly, in my opinion, that could potentially get into a snooze fest. I know, I didn't say that really. But instead, I am a mom. I'm a mom with a child who was diagnosed with autism at 2.5, so I am not an expert in ABA. I am not an expert in autism. I'm not a behavioral analyst. I'm a mom, and that's plenty, right? I never want to say I'm just a mom, because being a mom is a pretty cool thing. And my son was diagnosed with autism at 2.5. He's now about to be 9, and bless his little heart, he is just the light of my life and doing so well. He regressed into autism and was very profoundly affected. Tons of challenging behavior, including self-injurious behavior, and lost all functional communication, and now he talks a blue streak, and he is brilliant. He is absolutely brilliant. I'm going to get emotional talking about him. But as a result, and that, please, is a result of years of ABA therapy, really good quality ABA therapy. So I am as passionate as I can be about helping you to find your way to ABA therapy. One of the things I've been saying for the last couple of weeks is write in and tell me what is keeping you from ABA, or just as importantly, what's keeping you from getting the proper amount of quality ABA therapy. Because some of you I know are out there and you're having 10 hours of ABA therapy, which is not nothing, right? But it's not enough for the child that you have. Some of you have written in and said, I think that my child needs 35 hours of therapy a week. And I'm thinking you're probably right. And what you have funding for is 10 hours a week, and the frustration of that, because it's not getting it done. And that's the truth of the matter. That's just the rude reality. We don't try to candy coat it here, right? There's no point. At this point, somebody the other day was saying, oh, I don't know, is it okay to say poop? But I said, oh, here we can talk about poop, right? We do talk about poop. Let's lay it all out and say it like it is. 10 hours of ABA if your child needs 35 is not enough. That's like taking a half of a penicillin for half of the amount of time that the doctor said to take it and expecting to have the great result, right? There is a prescription and we need to follow it. So I want you to write in and tell me what's holding you back. If you've only got 10 hours and you need 35 hours and you think it's because you don't have the funding or the ABA provider doesn't have more therapists available, write to me and tell me what your problems are, because I want to help you to solve them. And I may not know all the answers, but I work in a wonderful building full of people who know answers and who know people who know answers and who know people who are working on the answers. So I've been granted access on your behalf, and that's what I want to do, is be a conduit to the answers for you. So please take advantage of that. Please use and abuse. When is somebody else going to say that to you? But please use and abuse, and I will scatter my little fingers out where I can to find answers for you. So how do you do that? How do you get a hold of us? Let's talk about some of the different ways that you get a hold of us. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com and it says live on your screen, then we are in fact live. And that box that's there that says your questions, you can type your question in there, hit enter, and it shows up here on my screen. What a wonderful thing. We can have a conversation in this way. If you're watching and it says rebroadcast, or you're watching us in one of the many other ways that you can watch us, then you still have the opportunity to talk to us. It's just a little bit of delayed gratification, which is a good thing to work on with our kids, right? You can email us. That's one of the ways you can get a hold of us. Email us any time of the day or night, wherever you are. We'll get the email the next time we're in the office. We'll answer your question on the next available live show, but we'll also send you a typewritten response. And I know some of you have written in or called in, and you see that I will refer you out to an expert, and that might take a day or so, but this is free. and eventually you will get your answer. Sometimes it takes us a little while to get it through the pipeline, but you will. And we try to cover the things that you ask about on the show. By the way, you can also call in. If you call the number, and it's 9 to 5 Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Friday, somebody will answer that phone. And if you want, you can be patched into the studio, and we can be talking here later on today. We're going to have a wonderful expert. If you want to be talking with me and with our expert about toileting, you could call in and ask a question in live time. If we're not live on the air, you can have an opportunity to talk to somebody, or you can leave a message, and we'll get back to you the next time that we're in the office. You can also Skype in, by the way, to the show. If you've got video capability, we can have your picture up on the screen and having a conversation in that way. I know for many of you that are watching in all over the world, abroad, that's a wonderful, inexpensive way to call into the show. You can also get a hold of us through Facebook. That's a wonderful way that a lot of you are participating. You answer the question of the day there. I just love that when you guys participate in that way, because you get to talk to each other too, and I see you guys supporting the moms and the dads and the young adults who are writing in on Facebook and answering the question, and you guys writing back to them and becoming friends with them. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we will have the question of the day in just a few minutes. And you can also tweet to us, whether it's a suggestion for a topic that you'd like to see covered on the show, whether you have something that you'd like to say worked for you, or something you'd like to see less of that's driving you crazy. We're here to serve you. So don't make us guess. Tell us what we can do to help you. That's really what we're here about. And I mentioned that there were other ways to watch the show other than watching us on autism-live.com. You can be watching us on Blip TV. This is a wonderful way. You can subscribe there, or just tune in and search topics. You can pause, rewind. I know a lot of times you're having to watch in between things. You got 5 minutes while you're waiting for something, or your child is in OT for 10 minutes and you're outside the door, and you can be watching on your phone. Lots of different ways to do that, but you can pause and come back to it. You can also be watching us on YouTube. We have our own channel on YouTube, and you can search topics there, leave us comments there even if you want to. Lots of fun videos on YouTube that you can catch up with all of the experts that we've had on the show. And by the way, when you're watching old episodes, don't feel like you can't ask a question, because we know where they are. We know where to find those experts. So if you have a question for any of the people, even if they were on a show months ago, feel free to write in and ask a question about that. We're also available on iTunes as a free download. You can download, get picture and sound. You can subscribe and get all the episodes, archive them yourself if you want, or just individual episodes. Very shortly, we'll have the audio-only portion of iTunes available for you, and we're now available on Ustream as well. So lots of exciting ways to watch us. If there is a way that you would like to be watching us that we don't currently have available, would you do me a favor and please tell us, and we'll make that happen if at all possible. And we have people who are very good at making things happen here, so it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay. We like to start every morning with something that we call the jargon of the day. Jargon of the day is, I really think it's the warm-up for us, gets our brains in tune with what we're doing, and helps us to make friends with the jargon. We've got to make friends with these terms because they're so important to the treatment that our child receives. If you've ever, and I'm sure you've all been in this circumstance where you've waited and waited for a meeting, you get there, and somebody starts talking about your child and what needs to be done for your child, but they're speaking in terms that you've never heard before. And then there's this wonderful moment in your brain where you have to make a decision. Do I just jot down these terms and go look them up later, or do I interrupt and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you say this in terms that a parent could understand? And which kind of disrupts the meeting a little bit, and they have to take a pause and go back and explain things. And often, because they're so used to using the jargon, their explanation that's supposed to be easy for you to understand, full of jargon again, right? And you give up because you don't want to keep stopping the meeting, especially if you're paying for it, right? So we make friends with the jargon and we begin to understand the kinds of things that are talked about having to do with our children. If you guys are watching the show, you know I'm a big fan of saying we need to be a strong member on the team. It's going to take a team, right? You know, there was the thing about it takes a village to raise a child. Well, with autism, it takes a small city and that's run by a strong team. And you want to be on that team and you want to be a strong member, right? I do. I learned very early on that your team is only as strong as the weakest player, and I never wanted that to be me. Well, being a stronger member on the team means understanding what the terms that the professionals use mean. Okay, so we take one word, one phrase, one anagram at a time and demystify it. Figure out what in the hey nani nani does it mean. Okay, today's word, which we talk about a lot, is antecedent. And you know, the first time I heard this, I don't know, I thought it was like a term from literature having to do with iambic pentameter. That's where my head went. But once I understood it, I was like, oh, okay, and it became a part of my vocabulary, which it very much is now. So what is an antecedent? Anything that occurs or is present immediately before the behavior of interest. Okay, as our definitions go, this is not a bad definition, but if we take and condense that down to what are we really saying, we're really asking what happened before. The antecedent is what happened before. As we look at behavior, we're always going to try to think of everything that our child does as behavior. So, you know, your son is biting, and we go, okay, that's a behavior. And your son is throwing things, that's a behavior. Your son is eating, that's a behavior. Your daughter is licking her lips, that's a behavior. Well, there are some behaviors that we want to increase, and there are some behaviors that we want to decrease, right? But one of the things that we know is that with every behavior, there's three things that happen. We call it the three-term contingent, right? Something happens, and that's the antecedent, right? Then the behavior occurs, and then there's a consequence for the behavior. And by the way, this is true for everyone. This is true for you. This is true for me. This is true for our kids on the spectrum. This is true for our kids that aren't on the spectrum. This is true for our boss, our, son or daughter's teacher, the principal of the school, the mailman, right? Something happens, there's a behavior, and there's a consequence for it. Stop and think about everything that you do in a given day and start thinking of it, just for today. You don't have to do it forever, but start thinking of it in terms of, and you'll notice, oh yeah, That's just kind of true. I had never stopped to think about it before my child had autism, but I think about it all the time now. Because when we know what the behavior is and what the antecedent and what the consequence is, we have a whole lot of information that we can monkey with and change things. I always like to remind myself that changing the actual behavior while it's happening, really, really difficult. We don't have a whole lot of control. If somebody's walking, short of tackling them, we can try to talk them into stopping, but really, do we have control over it? We really, really don't. But we have control over the things that happen before somebody walks, and we have the control over the consequences for when somebody walks, just as an example. So we're always, when a child is engaging in a behavior, that, let's say it's a behavior that we don't want to see as much of. We tend to call those challenging behaviors here, because that's exactly what they do, is challenge us and they challenge our kids. And if we want to decrease that behavior, we're probably going to we're going to have somebody do an FBA, a functional behavior assessment. And that's when they're going to determine what is the antecedent, what is the behavior, what is the consequence. So you can tell when you've got an ABA parent or you've got an ABA professional, because if somebody says, oh, well, Kristen was screaming and stomping and pulling her hair, right? And I always listen for the next question, what happened right before that? Right? Then I know, okay, we got people who are talking ABA. And it's really important to know what happened before. It's like thinking of the trigger for the behavior. And remember that all behaviors have this antecedent. I always like to use the example because it's crystal clear to me that, because we do this thousands of times a day, all of us have an antecedent to behavior and a consequence. But one of the things that I never think about, but that I do all the time, is that every single day, and this might be true of you as well, at some point I turn on a light. I turn on a light. Usually, and if you stop and think about it, we go through our day and there gets to be a point at night when we're at home, and especially this time of year, because usually we get home before it's dark, and you're in your house and you're going about your business, and at some point you reach over and flick on a light switch. It may be right before dinner, but at some point we go and turn on the light switch. Well, what happens right before we turn on the light switch? At some point, something happens that, we're having a moment and our eyes aren't adjusting. Sometimes we're not even thinking about it, right? And we instinctively go over and flick on the light switch. So the behavior is flicking on the light switch. The antecedent for all of us is something a little bit different. And then we have the consequence for it. The consequence for flicking on the light switch is that light floods the room and we can see better. So think about last night, at some point you turned on a light. What was the antecedent right before? Was it that you couldn't see something specifically, or was it that you were starting to feel uncomfortable because it was getting dark in the room? But there was an antecedent. There was a moment before. So we're going to look at all of our children's behavior and figure out what's the moment before, because sometimes we can change that moment before. For kids who are throwing tantrums and we see that, okay, well, the tantrum happens because this toy got taken away from them. Well, we can change the circumstances around that toy being taken away to prepare the child for what's going to happen. We call that an antecedent modification. If there's a behavior that we're changing and we're going to change what happens before, it's an antecedent modification. Very effective sometimes. Okay, so keep that in mind, antecedent. If it's still not abundantly clear, stick around because it will be. And you'll see your child do something today and you'll go, okay, there's the behavior. What happened right before? That's the antecedent. There we go. All right, we always have a question of the day for you. And the question of the day today, this is something that I ask parents a lot because it's very curious to me. We're all working to make autism awareness. A lot of people said in April, forget autism awareness, let's have autism action, right? But we know we need autism awareness. We were talking to a mom blogger yesterday, Shannon, who does the blog Mama's Turn Now. I encourage you to check it out. She did the letter to the mom who rolled her eyes at my son and talked about being at OT, and this mom was just rolling her eyes at her son's behavior. And eventually then her daughter did it. And we've all been there, right? So, but I do like to ask people because it's funny to me what the world does know and what the world doesn't know about autism. So if there was one thing that you would want the world to know about autism, what would it be? And I got to say, this changes for me day to day, right? But I think more than anything else today, what I wish the world knew about autism is that our kids are worth it. I think it's all too easy for people to dismiss things when it gets uncomfortable for them, when it gets difficult for them. And we know that autism has an element to it that's difficult. It's not smooth. It's not comfortable, right? It's bumpy and it has some edges to it. But our kids are worth it. They're worth the financial cost for sure. And I know that some of our legislators understand that and some don't. Some are so afraid of spending money right now that it's ending up costing them more later on. And some people are so sure that if they give money to our kids, that nobody else's kids will get what they need. It's very disheartening. But our kids are worth it. They're absolutely worth it. And that's what I wish. It's so hard because I think everyone at this point has to have someone in their lives that they know that either has a child with autism or in some way their lives have to be touched with autism. Look, we can't be at 1 in 88 and people's lives aren't touched by autism. And I used to think, well, if everybody just knew one child with autism, then they would understand that our kids are worth it. Unfortunately, if you know one child with autism, then you know one child with autism, right? I'm at the point now where I sort of wish that everybody would have to know 5 children with autism to understand that if 5 children are not the same, then no one could be the same. I don't know if they would get that or not. But in the end, I wish that they would understand how worth it, how there's so much hard work involved around autism, but our kids are worth it. They deserve the progress, and they deserve the care, and they deserve the treatment. So that's what I wish. And I think we're moving in that direction. But I'd love to know what you wish the world knew about autism. And you can answer the question by phoning us, by Skyping us. You can tweet, you can Facebook. A lot of you Facebook, and we'll check in later on in the next hour to see the kinds of things that you guys have responded. I look forward to it every day to hear what you guys have to say because you guys cut right to the heart of it. And I always say I've never met an autism parent that I didn't like. I don't know what that is. I know people say, oh, well, we're chosen for this. I don't know. But I have yet to meet the autism parent that I didn't like. We all have challenges, right? But I see people who are working through the pain, working through the grief, working through the anger, working through the discouragement for the love of a child. How could you not like somebody who's doing that? And we're all doing the best we can, right? Some days that's better than others. There's some days when I go, oh, don't push me today. Don't push me today. I'm an autism mom on the edge. Don't push me, right? And I'm entitled to those days. And I give people fair warning. In any case, we also always have a topic of the day. Our topic of the day this week, all week, as it was last week, because I'm just on a tear about it, is ABA for beginners. Going back to basics, talking about what gets the job done. Because at the end of the day, that's what I want, is something that gets the job done. I know I don't always act that way. There are times when I revert back to the old Shannon and I do things as a parent and I see that I'm not getting the results. And then I go, what's wrong with this picture? In my frustration, then I go, oh, right, yeah, I'm not using my tools. And I need to use my ABA tools. And that's when I have to go back to basics and remind myself, oh, right, in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing. So if I'm asking my child to do something and I want them to be able to do it and do it consistently, I've got to make it reinforcing for them. Same thing for me. In order for me to continue using my tools of ABA, it has to be reinforcing, right? It is because it works. Sometimes I trip up, though. In any case, everything that we talk about today, we're going to talk about through that filter of ABA for Beginners, taking it back to basics. I figure if you're new to ABA or you're new to the show, it's going to be beneficial to you. For those of you that are, in the midst of ABA, boy, it's really helpful to go back to basics. And for those of us whose children, my son graduated from his ABA program almost exactly a year ago, and it's really important for me to go back to basics and remember and apply these principles, because we don't have all that ABA support in our house anymore. So it's me and my husband, we're the ones that are upholding it. So really important for me to keep going back to basics and remember, what works. If it works, don't break it, right? Okay, so some of the things that we're going to talk about today, we've got a motor skills tip for you coming up in just a little while. We're going to talk about healthy eating. We're going to have a special guest with us today. Dr. Amy Kenzer is going to be with us, and we're going to be talking about toileting. You guys have asked a lot of questions about toileting. I know that it's huge. When you don't have toileting, it seems like it's such a faraway thing and you're never going to have it. And when you do have toileting, it seems like such a faraway thing that you never had to go through. It's one of those weird things. It's life-changing what happens when you get toileting, and not just in terms of not having to purchase the pull-ups or whatever it is that you're using. I mean, that's big in and of itself, right? To not have to buy that stuff and to have the money that you were spending on that to spend on something else, huge, right? But there's something else that happens, I think, between the parent and the child. It raises everybody's self-esteem. It raises everybody's hope. It raises the child's confidence in themselves. There is something that happens around toileting that, being able to understand what your body is doing and to deal with it appropriately, that opens a door to so many other things. So it's not something to be taken lightly, and the success that we can have with toileting with ABA is phenomenal. And I am excited that we're going to have somebody come in and talk about it we're going to talk about it for 45 minutes. So we're going to talk about it from every angle you can get at it. Excuse me. And I encourage you, if you have questions about toileting, write them in now. You don't have to wait till the 11 o'clock hour to write them in, because we'll stack them up and be ready for them. Okay. Also, we're going to talk a little bit, if we have time today, about the DSM4 and the DSM5. There's been lots of speculation, and I've been saying on the show, well, the study said this, and but we don't know, because we haven't seen it yet. Well, you can see it now. You can absolutely see what the proposed DSM-5 is. We're going to be talking about that, how it differs from the DSM-4, and what you can do. There's an open period for questions and comments right now that it only goes until June 15th. So if you have questions about the DSM-5 and you disagree with some of the things that are on it, you get to have a say right now, only till June 15th. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we'll probably be talking about that a lot more in the days to come. So stick with us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to right? We're going to tackle a motor skills tip. Stick with us.
My name is Crystal Shepard.
I'm Pete.
And our son Logan was diagnosed in February of 2003. Wow, it seems like a long time ago.
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough to find a card when he was 20 months old. My husband called and said, "You need to go to this place. I've researched it. You need to go right now." So I went and knocked on the door, and we found Doreen.
Doreen, we sat down, and I'll never forget what she said. She goes, "Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get him caught up and make sure he never falls behind again." I was like, that's it, And
He's a very fun, popular kid. He
Rock
never
star.
Rock star. He's a drummer, quite an accomplished drummer. He never stops talking. He's got a funny story and a smile for everybody that he meets. And it's pretty amazing. He's a completely different kid.
Go Logan!
recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
My name's Monica,
And I'm Mark.
and we have a son, Riley, and he is autistic.
Riley was almost completely non-communicative at the time that he was diagnosed. Really no language, no interest in speaking. And one of the big changes is he independently states a lot of things now.
I need to walk.
You need to walk? Make him walk. Asks for things that he wants, responds appropriately.
Hi, Daddy going.
Oh, so nice. We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider. And if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Did you have some glasses?
And now she engages with everybody. It's wonderful. She likes to play, and she's very affectionate, and she expresses that now. Her language has gotten a lot better just in the last 4 months. It's amazing.
Since starting with CARD, Amaya's made a ton of progress, and we couldn't be more grateful that she has become potty trained, started using utensils individually. She is learning how to navigate public, is holding our hands, and just wanting to be around people more. So we're so grateful for everything that you guys have done.
Hi, Dr. Grandpa Shay. Congratulations on your 20-year anniversary of CARD. I love all my CARD teachers. They are the best. And now I'd like to play you a Beatles song. It's called Cross the Universe.
I first saw Dr. Grandpa Shay speak at a biomedical conference somewhere, and I was just so impressed with her. She stood up there and she talked with such confidence about recovery and what she could do for these children, and she had a whole curriculum, and I was just so impressed. But she said things like, teach them, help them to develop these other skills that they have. And I thought that was so neat hearing that from her, that it would be good for them socially and help them to bridge with others. And so over the years, that's actually something my son has developed. If he hadn't had speech therapy or OT over the years, he probably would be just about, pretty much the same child still, not so different. But if he hadn't had CARD, he would be a completely different child. This program has unlocked the door for him to have a bright future.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
My name is Rachel Pekorski, and I have a son, Kyle Pekorski, who's 7 years old now.
Cool art by Kyle.
Around 15 months, we noticed that he had lost some speech, that he was headbanging, he had tantrums, and we were lucky. We waited and we got in with CARD, and it started working right away.
I have another exciting feature. If you put more marbles in, they alternate.
He's in a second grade class. He's at the top of his class. He reads over 100 words a minute. He's reading at 5th grade level. He loves space and astronomy, and he'll tell you, why does Venus rotate backwards? Yeah, why don't the marbles go up? Why do they go down?
Because gravity.
And he's always wanting to know more.
Why you're the one that takes the microphone?
He loves to surf.
First, I didn't want to surf. but now I love to surf.
He loves to horseback ride.
I won a trophy.
You have made a difference in his life.
Car helped me to save.
I owe everything to you. Now, who built this?
I did.
And are you a good builder?
Yes!
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California, and it's time for a motor tip. There are lots of different things that our children need to learn in order to grow and progress, right? And part of that, the things that we tend to be most concerned with, and we're going to talk a little bit about the criteria for the diagnosis in the next hour, but we tend to, I think, as parents, be really concerned with things like our children's social deficits and our child's language deficits, right? Because those are the things that are really pronounced and on the diagnostic criteria. We also tend to be concerned about challenging behaviors, which tend to go into that repetitive and ritualistic category, which is the third category. And I think it's all too easy to overlook our child's motor skills, when in fact, even though it's not part of a classical autism diagnosis, it is, a lack of coordination is absolutely part of an Asperger's syndrome diagnosis. So I think it's important for us to not overlook the motor skills area. For a child to be coordinated and have the ability to use their muscles and to use their physical body and their muscular body in a way that is productive is going to help them in all of the other areas. That what we see if a child goes out on a playground, I see this very clearly with my son as a third grader right now, that he's supposed to be on the playground and working on social skills and working on his language skills, and in particular his social language. But right now, because he does not have great skills in dribbling a basketball, it's really hard because that's currency for third graders at his school on their playground. So we're having to work on dribbling. And I do think that sometimes you just work on these things as they come up, right? Because you're so busy working on other things that sometimes, you just don't get to it until you get to it. And basketball, I'm sorry, while we were working language was not the priority. We were working on other things. But the tip today is that when we're working, I've got like an eyelash that's driving me crazy. This is how live, this is when we're always dealing with live things, yeah. In any case, I know, TMI. But when we're working on things in terms of motor, we always want to keep in mind what I say, principle number one, which is in order for any behavior to be maintained, it's got to be reinforcing. So no matter what we're working on, we want to make it reinforcing for the child. It needs to be fun. Well, a lot of the motor things have great potential to be reinforcing in and of themselves, especially if the child gains a certain proficiency. But they're the kinds of things that if they don't come easy to you, they can become work. So we don't want to automatically assume that, for instance, running and skipping are reinforcing for the child. Can't assume. They may be, but they may not be. Also, it's a very interesting thing to me that, my dad had a stroke, and his stroke primarily hit his language center. So he had aphasia and would use the wrong word for the wrong thing. And he had a little bit, just a tiny little bit of paralysis on one side that, the average person wouldn't notice, but he needed to have some OT to deal with it. And I remember being fascinated. It was the first time that I'd ever seen somebody with any kind of a brain injury working on something, because I remember that there were tasks that my dad already knew how to do that they were reteaching him, but teaching him in these very specific ways, that they were making a list of, here are all the different things that you have to do to be able to complete this task. It was a task analysis. I didn't know that at the time. And I thought it was really interesting. I was like, well, that's kind of weird because he already knows how to walk. So we're going to do a task analysis and break down walking into these really concrete steps. But, he got walking because, again, the paralysis was minor. But this is the way in which they teach anybody who is having a great difficulty learning or relearning a motor skill. It's very effective. And in fact, we use that with our kids. We take a big skill that can seem overwhelming and frustrating for whatever reason, and we break it down into little bite-sized morsels. And I also think what comes to mind, because one of the things I wanted to talk today were about hopping and skipping and jumping, and how do we teach this to our children? Because it's one of those things that usually just comes to a child. Just one of those, crazy things that as parents of kids on the autism spectrum, we go, that's not my life. But you see the other little 2-year-olds who just figure out skipping all on their own. It just, magically one day they skip and nobody has to break it down for them and go, okay, so you're standing together and you pull one leg up, and while you've got one leg up, you want to hop forward and then put that leg down and pull the other one up and hop forward. You don't have to go through that with the average 2-year-old. But it's really interesting to me. I remember years ago being in a dance class, and there was a guy who was not, I'm not a dancer at all. And so it was that kind of a dance class, people who really don't know the right foot from their left foot. And at one point, the teacher asked us to skip from one side of the dance room to the other. And we were probably in our late 20s, early 30s at this point. And this guy who was standing next to me, he said, "What is wrong with me? I can't do it," and she was showing us how to skip too. And he said, I can't do it. I just got to stop and think like a 3-year-old, and then I can do it. If I think it through too much, I can't do it. And that was his thing, was, I can't think of all the individual steps. But I actually appreciated it because I thought that's fascinating. I never really realized all of the things that are involved in skipping. It was just something that came to me at some point. And the truth is that it can't come to some of our kids. Yeah, there are some kids on the spectrum that it just comes to them. But a lot of our kids, they can't just do it. So whatever we're teaching in the motor curriculum, we want to think in terms of creating a task analysis, or if you're not interested in spending your time doing that, the skills program has task analyses on these activities all mapped out for you already. Because what we can do when we have a task analysis is just teach one part of it. Just one part of it. And I think that it's really important to remember, Dr. Jonathan Tarbox was with us on Friday, and I keep thinking about something that he said, which was, when you're teaching something to somebody on the autism spectrum, it's going to take longer than you think, and it's going to take more patience and more effort than you think. If you can make peace with that and not be in a big, big hurry, you can get it done. But it's going to take longer than you thought. It's going to take more effort. It's going to take more than you thought it was going to take, and then you can do it. So, and I've been thinking about that, thinking, oh my gosh, there's a certain amount of peace in that, right? Of knowing, okay, I'm going to be able to do it, but it's going to take me longer. All right, okay, well, all right, let's dig in then. Let's start. And so teaching something like skipping or hopping, and I remember very distinctly that my child, they were asking him to do the 2-footed jumping, and he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. He would lift one foot up, and he could not figure it out for anything. And what they eventually did was, they tried like twice, and then they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And then we worked about it in a very systematic way, where, teaching him, and I remember part of it with my son, and it's going to be different with different kids, but holding his hands and having him try to lift up and lifting him at the same time, so that he was barely applying pressure and giving him that reinforcement of he loved the feeling of going up. So he would work on that and strengthen the muscles to the point where in a short period of time he was able, and of course there was more to it too. There was bending down first, right? So that we just worked on for a little while, and then coming up at the same time while we pulled up on his hands, so that he got the reinforcement of being airborne, and it really spurred him on to want to do it. Same thing with skipping, that as I was saying, the lifting one leg up, hopping forward. Well, we may just practice lifting one leg up and jumping there, or we may try, just jumping on one leg without lifting the other leg all the way up. Lots of different ways, but the task analysis really gives us the capability to teach it one little morsel at a time. And our kids, we see that the studies have shown that it's really, really effective teaching them in that way when we reinforce them with each step along the way. All right. we have to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back and do our healthy eating tip for the week. And you're not going to like me. I'm just going to tell you right now, you're not going to like me. Because we're going to talk about sugar. So stick with us. We're going to be back in just a minute.
ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, was founded in 2004 by several passionate parents who believe that access to early, effective treatment is vital for individuals with autism. Together with Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, the world's leading provider of therapy for autism, this group created ACT Today to do just as the name implies, take action immediately to treat autism spectrum disorders.
A lot of families and parents and even physicians don't yet accept the fact that we are recovering children with autism.
In 2006, inspired by her struggle to get treatment for her young son Wyatt, television producer and author Nancy Alspaugh Jackson and her husband Reed hosted a backyard benefit for the foundation called Denim and Diamonds for Autism. Tens of thousands of dollars were raised, and in 2008, Alspaugh Jackson took the helm of ACT Today as executive director.
This country has to come together to save a generation of children.
With a dedicated board of directors, a small but committed staff called the A-Team, as in autism, ACT Today is making a huge difference in the lives of children across the country. Grants that fund programs for behavior therapy, special needs schools, and summer camps. Medical needs like diagnostic tests and special diets. Basic safety equipment such as helmets for children who repetitively bang their heads, and fencing for those who wander. Assisted technologies and assistance dogs.
Hi, my name is Max, and I love my iPad too. It's so great. I can take photos.
In 2010, ACT for Military Families became the first national campaign to benefit military children with autism.
I'm Joe Montaigne. As a father of a daughter with autism, I know the challenges that brings.
ACT Today continues to educate and raise national awareness on the need for early and intensive intervention for an epidemic that affects at least 1 in 110 children.
I called on November 1st. And I'm like, how am I going to get notified? How are you going to let me know? And they ended up looking and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above.
ACT Today, fulfilling its mission of helping families with autism, one child at a time.
Welcome back to Autism Live. It's time for the healthy eating tip of the week, and I said you're not going to like me today because it's anarchy. I'm going to talk about sugar. Okay, we know as parents and as teachers how important it is that our kids be as nutritionally supported as possible, right? Because we're constantly trying to set our kids up for success. Isn't that what we're trying to do? We're trying to set ourselves up for success, and we're trying to set them up for success. Sometimes, some days, we all have an off day. Where we let our kids stay up too late, they get overtired, or we let them eat things. I think that's, you got to live your life, right? And you need to enjoy your life. However, I just want to make the case for being as healthy as possible and giving them as much of a ritual as possible. What happens, we talked yesterday about a bedtime ritual and making sure that we uphold. It's hard work, but it's not as hard as dealing with the tantrums that come when we don't. Right? I know, I don't always think of it that way either. But when we can think of that, it's certainly, I think it becomes easier to uphold the ritual. I was just talking to somebody this morning about somebody that I know who is absolutely rigid about making sure that their child gets enough sleep and that they're, completely, that's the filter that they go through. If you want to go to an event, they're like, nope, my child has to be in bed by this time. And on the one hand, we all kind of roll our eyes a little bit, except that what I really appreciate is that child is a lot more level than everybody else's child. Certainly a lot more level than my child, that they aren't prone to all these emotional outbursts that we see, that we, sometimes we go, okay, well, it's just par for the course. Kids are going to have tantrums, but a lot of times meltdowns happen as a result of other things. And sometimes it can be nutritional, and sometimes it can be blood sugar, and sometimes it can be not having enough rest. What I like to think about is if we just try to get our heads around being as healthy as possible. And you know, I'm not saying that sugar is a bad thing. I'm picking my words carefully here, right? I'm not saying sugar is a bad thing. Like all things in moderation, most things tend to be okay. Moderation is the thing that's difficult for our kids, especially when something is particularly good to them. So if you can give your child just a little bit of sugar from time to time and your child can deal with it okay and their behavior stays the same, then you're fine. But if you see that your child isn't capable of just having a little bit of sugar, which is the case with a lot of our kids, or that when your child has a bit of sugar on board, that their ability to control their behavior is either that much harder or impossible. I go to birthday parties all the time with, mostly neurotypical kids, and I sit there and watch what happens, and I am frightened. I know that for my child, his little ecosystem is so delicate that we don't do sugar at all. And I'm not suggesting that all of you need to stop sugar altogether, right? I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying look at your individual child and see what can your child take. If my child has a big piece of fruit, he gets a little on the silly side. Actually, a big piece of fruit, he gets a lot on the silly side. Who am I kidding here? So we have to monitor even the amount of fruit that he has. And over the years, as he's gotten older, he can handle more and more and more because he's now aware of it. Sometimes we love to go to the farmer's market on Sunday and they have the free samples. And he gets the free samples of this fruit, that fruit, and the other thing. He just loves it. And he'll feel himself starting to get silly, and I'll notice that he'll have a little bit of behavior going on, and I'll say, dude, what's happening over there? And he's like, I might have had a little too much fruit. I can feel it happening. And then we have a conversation about, does he have the self-restraint? But we're talking, he's almost 9. There's no way that he could have done that when he was 4. So we just really rationed fruit. But for you in your home, if you take a look at your child and say, okay, I think, birthday parties are a sensory nightmare, and there's all that's going on too. And a lot of times, you leave the birthday party and there's a little bit of behavior afterwards because there's a lot of noise, but it's also a lot of sugar. It's a lot of sugar. And our kids have enough problems having to be able to control what's happening in their bodies and the way they feel, that we don't need to make it harder. So my assignment for you, if you're willing, and I told you you're going to hate me, is to at least take a week. And I'm not saying change anything in this week, but take a look and keep a record of how much sugar your child is having, when they have it. And we talked about antecedent behavior and consequence. Well, sugar is more of an EO, an establishing operation, than an antecedent, right? But I want you to kind of keep a record of, you give your child sugar and what happens. What happens when you give your child sugar, and how often you give your child sugar, because I think what a lot of people don't realize is how much sugar is in the diet. And then once you've looked at it for a week, and then you can look back and say, okay, well, here is in fact what's going on. Then you can make decisions about, do I need to scale back? And if you do, to see what happens as a result. I think it's really important, unless there's a health issue, to not do things cold turkey. Right? It's not necessarily good for us, and it's not necessarily good for our kids. So if your child has been having a tremendous amount of sugar, you probably don't want to go to no sugar all in one fell swoop, unless you're really at a point where your child's sugar level is of health concern, in which case you might want to do cold turkey under a doctor's care. But to take a look at it, see exactly how much sugar your child is having, noting, are you getting behavior issues around when your child has sugar? Was your child doing okay in the morning, and then there was a lollipop at lunch, and now the behavior in the afternoon, not so good? We just saw, I mentioned that my son was doing STAR testing. And so I think 8 days. And during those 8 days, there was a reinforcement snack during the testing, so that normally the kids, they have school in the morning and then they get a snack and then they come back and they have lessons and then they have lunch and then they come back and learn and then they go home. Well, now during the testing, what they did, because they wanted the kids to stay sharp, was they had a bit of a snack in between in the morning before there was snack time. So it was 2 snacks instead of 1. And we had asked, because my son's on a very specific diet, to know what they were having. But it ended up being a lot of fruit stuff. So for the other kids, maybe it wasn't as bad sugar-wise, but for my son, it was, top in the max. And, we thought he could handle it and he would be okay and it would be fine. And what we heard back, though, on a regular, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not that funny. What we heard back was that he was great for the testing, but every afternoon last week he was struggling, and the teacher said, I don't know whether it's just the focusing on the test, but his behavior, he was really silly in the afternoons. I've never seen anything like that. Well, that's what happens when you give him fruit in the morning. So you pick your battles. But in any case, take a look at your child. See what's happening in your child's ecosystem in relation to sugar. Make an informed choice. And think to yourself, I think what a lot of people find is that they go, oh, my child really doesn't have that much sugar. They just really don't have that much sugar. And then when you start to keep a chart of it, you go, oh, my goodness. Well, yeah, there was sugar in the pancakes that I gave her this morning. And oh, and then, there was that lollipop around noon. And then, there was a piece of candy. Oh, wait a second. This is ending up being a lot of sugar for a little body. Take a look at it before you decide to do anything and see. Because if your child is fine with it, your child's weight is fine, and their health is fine, and their blood tests come back and they're fine, and you're not seeing any behaviors around the sugar, you might be fine. But for a lot of our kids, there are lots of things to consider. And then you can slowly start to wean them off of sugar, and while you're doing that, you're replacing it with fresh fruit and really high sugar vegetables, things like peppers. But again, those are on the Dirty Dozen list, so make sure you get those organic, or at least grown by a farmer who isn't spraying. All right, keep an eye on the sugar. All right, it's time for the A word. This is the wonderful documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, where we're following a little boy who was diagnosed with autism, and he has started ABA therapy, early intensive behavioral intervention, ABA therapy, really high quality ABA therapy. And we're about 7 months into therapy at this point that we're going to watch today. And this little boy has made tremendous progress. But they're still working, tweaking little things out, and he still has a ways to go, but he's getting closer and closer to being caught up. Exciting, right? Isn't that what we want for all of our kids, to be caught up? And notice how in this week's episode, they're really noticing that he wants to play interactively. He's not into his toys today. They're doing a lot of NET with this little boy today. But I want you to notice in these first couple of segments when he's playing with his dad and with a therapist, notice the eye contact, because that wasn't there 7 months ago, and it's just incredible. And how much fun he's having. So take a look. This is the A word.
Come here. No, really, come here. Trust me this time. I won't throw you. No, really, come here. Trust me this time. I won't throw you. No, really, this time trust me.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Woo! If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Yay! If you're happy and you know it, then your face will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Stomp your feet. Say hooray. Hooray! Good job, come here. So we just taught that song to him last week. Or I did. Daddy, he's outside. Who's upside down? Who's upside down? Who's upside down? Touch your head. Touch your ears. I got you again. Oh, you're so easy. Touch your nose. Touch your eyes. Got you again.
Today, Jack Riley is really playful, but isn't interested in playing with any of his toys. He's more interested in social games. So what Jessica does is integrate his lessons in the play, such as body parts.
Touch your head. What's your name? Good. How old are you?
2.
Good job. What sound does the lion make?
Roar. Roar.
Roar. What sound does the bear make?
Grr, grr, grr.
What sound does a Jack Riley make? That's a hard one. I want to see if you'd make up something.
Jack Riley.
I want to see if you'd make something up. What's up, dude? Nice hands? You want me to play?
Play.
You want me to play?
Play.
Play? Okay, I'll play. You just have to ask.
Hey, Suzanne, can I try something?
Yeah.
Can I try having him get your attention? I want to see if he'll actually
Generalize. Okay. Okay, Suzanne's going to be in charge of the pillow sandwiches now. If you want them, you need to ask her.
Look.
Look. Do you want a pillow sandwich?
Oh,
Oh, look at the pillows. Who has the pillows?
Hey, bear. Hey, Susan.
Yes?
Okay. Hey, bear.
Hey,
Yes.
okay. Wait, pillow sandwiches.
Can we work on waiting too? You can pause it whenever and just have him wait. Okay, hey,
Wait.
we're gonna wait.
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 That's not good.
We're gonna try again. You gotta do nice waiting and then we can watch the video, okay?
Nice waiting.
Nice
waiting. Nice. That's nice touch. Soft touch. Nice touching.
What do you see? You see letters? I see letters.
I see letters.
Good waiting. Okay.
Okay.
You can watch it now.
Can we start it? Yeah, there. Alphabetical is jumping. Okay, pause.
Okay, we're gonna wait. Wait.
Nice waiting. Nice waiting.
That's better. Good job.
Nice waiting.
All right, perfect. Good
Okay.
job.
Nice waiting, buddy.
That's much better.
I had a crush on my son. I'm done. We'll watch him later, okay? We'll watch him later. We'll watch him later. No, we'll watch it later. No. Jack, settle down. Settle down. We'll watch the computer later. It's not going anywhere.
Jack Riley is upset because the fun activity, to him, has abruptly stopped. Transitioning is anxiety-ridden for Jack Riley because he has difficulty in anticipating what will happen next. In general, though, transitioning for kids is abstract and difficult to grasp.
Hey, should we go jump a little bit somewhere? What do you want to do? Should we play upwards?
Daddy.
Should we go see Daddy?
Ready?
Just kidding.
Should we go?
Jack Riley quickly gets over being upset once a new fun activity occurs. He now sees that there are other fun things to do. The issue was that he doesn't know that he will have access to something fun again, but by practicing transitioning, he will eventually learn that just because the activity ends, it's not gone forever.
Now I know my ABCs. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me?
That was Master P. Diddy White Ice Dude. That's who did that.
Wow, is that gonna be your stage name, Jack Riley?
When you grow up, don't be a tool.
Oh man, Vanilla Ice. Wow, that brought me back to when I was a little girl.
Riley. I love you, Jack Riley. Bye-bye.
Daddy. Oh my God.
Do you want to go see Daddy?
Go see Daddy.
Okay. We can go do some stuff with Daddy. You want to go do some stuff with Daddy?
Let's go see Daddy.
Okay, we can go do that.
Oh, no.
That's okay.
Jack, listen, we don't touch this stuff. That's Grandma and Papa. Papa and Mama. Mama. You never get to meet Mama.
Mama.
Yeah.
Mama.
That's right.
Mommy.
And who's that?
Mommy.
Who's that? Who's that?
Daddy.
Daddy, that's right.
Mommy.
That's right.
Mommy.
You were only a promise then. You were only a promise.
Welcome back. So that's The A Word, an amazing documentary. By the way, this is an ongoing documentary, so you can watch. They generally have a new episode about every week, and they have their own YouTube channel. You can see it there on the screen. You can go back and watch all the way from the beginning and take a look at as they were waiting to start ABA therapy and how Jack Riley was doing then, up until now and further, because we're a good couple of months behind on the progress that they've been able to show. So there's so many things that I love about it. I love that you get to see the arc, because there are things that you work on. Sometimes it's funny when you see this happen in your home. I called it the autism miracle in my living room, and I still call it that, because it really was miraculous to see how, when my son was first diagnosed with autism, we would see that puzzle piece everywhere, and I would go, what's with the puzzle piece? What's with the puzzle piece? And everybody would say, oh, well, but it's a little mysterious, the autism thing, and it's putting the pieces together to make everything work. And I really saw that when they were doing ABA in my living room, because they would work on something, and as a parent, and I was deeply, deeply curious and wanted to learn, but I didn't see how the whole puzzle went together while I was in it. I do now. And I think it's beneficial for the parent to know how the puzzle pieces go together. So I like to give you guys a heads up, and you might be seeing this in your home, and the therapists don't have time to tell you because they're busy working with your child. But, they'll work on something with your child, and a new program gets added, and you think, okay, how is this going to get us to the place where my child's going to be able to speak? But it's just one of the puzzle pieces. And I love to put together a puzzle, and you see something and you have no idea what it is on that puzzle piece, and you put it together and you put 3 other pieces around it, you go, oh, it's a basket. I wouldn't have known that was a basket, right? Same thing with our kids, that they work on a skill and they put it together, and then it goes together with a bunch of other things, and pretty soon you have a clearer picture of what's happening. And so I love that you're getting to see this arc of what happens with ABA therapy and how all those puzzle pieces go together. But did you look where I looked at the beginning there when they were playing with Jack Riley? First the dad was playing with him on the bed, and then the therapist was helping him on the bed, and then the filmmaker got involved in it. But did you see the crazy good eye contact that was being made? And I should stop saying crazy good, because that's my expression, but a lot of times what we see when children are being taught eye contact, that people will sometimes think that it's this staring thing, that the child is going to stare, which is not natural, right? We want natural eye contact. Even as I'm talking to you, there are times that I look away and I'm thinking, and I'm not staring constantly at you. That would get creepy after a while. So, and we see that with Jack Riley, that at this point he's making spontaneous eye contact that's completely appropriate. That he looks at Jessica, and then he looks at the pillows, and then he looks at Jessica, which is part of that joint attention thing that we talk about all the time, that triangle of attention, that the child's looking at something because Jessica's looking at the pillows too, so the two of them are looking at the pillow together, then they're looking up at each other like, are you going to get a pillow sandwich or not? And there's that excitement building. They're sharing a moment. That's a conversation. We don't talk enough about verbal behavior, because verbal behavior is not necessarily spoken. And that is verbal behavior right there. There are things, there's an exchange, there's communication happening as he's looking at the pillow and looking at her. Are you going to do this to me? Are you going to? And she's looking at the pillow. Are we going to do this? And it's quite fascinating to watch. There's times when the filmmaker will trace the eye contact so that we can see it, to point it out. And I almost want to go back in. I want one of those things like Ellen has on her show where you have the white pen and I can, draw lines and go, look, there's eye contact. Look, did you see it there? Look, it's there again. We'll have to put that on our wish list, huh, Emily? One of those white, I want to be like the football coach who can draw lines to it. In any case, there was a lot of intense, appropriate eye contact. And you know what? He looks like a different child as a result of that. And he's learning things that he would not learn otherwise as a result of that. So really, really exciting that the natural eye contact is happening. I also want to point out, too, we talked a little bit about NET yesterday and how it's so important to have that be a part of your ABA program. If people are coming to your house and doing ABA therapy and all they're doing is sitting at a table and doing DTT, discrete trial teaching at a table, I got to tell you that you need to be talking to them about that and saying, why is that happening? Because if we're not taking the lessons that we learn and putting them in the natural environment, it's not quality ABA, and it's a real disservice to our children. We're not going to get to generalization, which is where we need to get with our kids. So if you started ABA and all you're seeing is somebody who's sitting at the table doing DTT, ask some questions and get some answers and change providers, seriously. Because NET is a really important part of your child's program. Natural environment training, allowing to take the things that you're learning and put them in the natural environment. It's exactly what they're doing here with Jack Riley. He doesn't feel like playing with his toys, and she's running lessons with him while they're playing with the pillow sandwich. She's saying, touch your nose, and he does. So he's working on body parts. And he gets tickled, and he gets the pillow sandwich. He gets somebody's attention appropriately, and he gets the pillow sandwich. He's having a wonderful time. When we were talking yesterday about how important it is to play with a child before you delve into working specifically on lessons. And, one of the key questions that is asked about whether the child's ready to start learning with a particular therapist is if the child runs to them as opposed to away from them. Then if the child is running to you, then you're ready to start learning. If the child is thrilled when you're there, I think it was in this week's episode, or I don't know if it was this week or last week, where the parents are standing there and the dad's been playing with the son and says, okay, I'm going to leave you with Jessica now. And we don't get any crying and hysterics. The child is thrilled. He's been playing with daddy. He's thrilled, and he's thrilled to play with Jessica. Well, we saw in this episode that this is a child who doesn't deal well with transitions, right? He hates for one thing to end. Well, he's thrilled to be playing with daddy, but he's also thrilled to get to play with Jessica, just one of his therapists. She's the therapist that we see in the course of the show, but she's just one of the therapists that works on his team. So really important. We get to see him working on waiting, and this is an area that's hard for him. We always want to have a really good mix of things, by the way, for our kids, that waiting is really, really hard, and he's working on being able to ask for somebody's attention appropriately. But we want to have things in a child's program that are really balanced, not just only be working on one thing, and not just be working on all things that are really, really difficult, right? It's so important when our kids, and it's one of the things we were talking about earlier with toileting, and we're going to be talking about this with Dr. Amy Kenzer at the top of the next hour, but how important it is to give our kids set them up for success, give them an opportunity to succeed and get the benefit of it so that they get the reinforcement. Once a child gets one thing, and this is what I was saying before about toileting, they get toileting and the self-esteem that comes with that, then they're willing to take on other things. Then suddenly fastening and pulling up zippers, and I'll tell you what happens with kids with autism right around then is that they find the way to communicate and say, do it myself. That thing that we hear our friends' kids doing, where they say, they get that independent streak where I do it myself, right? That we long for in our kids. But one lesson can feed on to other lessons. When they get that esteem and go, I know how to do this. I'm a big boy. I'm a big girl. I can do that too. I do it myself. Love that phase. All right. So watch the A Word. Watch the back episodes if you haven't seen it. You can continue watching. It's okay. We like to pick apart each episode every week because I thoroughly enjoy it. I get so much out of it, and I hope that you guys do too. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to look at your viewer responses for the question of the day, which if you haven't answered them already, you can right now. In fact, let's take a minute just to go over some of the different ways that you can interact. If it says live on your screen right now, and you're watching us on autism-live.com, you can type your question into the question box, hit enter, it shows up here. If you're watching us in any of the other ways, or it says rebroadcast, you can email us right now or any time of the day or night, and we will get your question. We'll put it on the next available show, and we'll also send you a typewritten response. You can call us, and we're happy to patch you into the show, or we'll call you back if we're not here live. You can also Skype into the show. And for the question of the day, a lot of you like to put your answer on Facebook. We really appreciate that. And we're going to start to cover some of those after we take a short break. And you can also tweet with us and give us the topic of the, give us the answer to the question of the day. Lots of different ways to participate. So let's take a break, and we'll come back with your viewer response to the question for the day.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms. Detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity. Brief and visually appealing video tutorials. A variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and it's time for your responses to our question of the day. I tell you, this is one of my favorite parts of the day because I learned so much from you guys. So many of you have written into Facebook today. The question today was, what do you wish the world knew about autism? I'm going to start going through it, but we need to get to the DSM4 and 5 stuff. So we're probably not going to get through all of them. But somebody wrote in and said that ignorance, in all caps, is, in all caps, much worse than autism. Amen to that. Okay, another person, how treatable it is. Another who says it's like looking in a mirror backwards. That's interesting. Another person who says that these special people are smart and able to do things you wouldn't know. Also, they are lonely because people shun them. Open hearts and minds and eyes and see that they are so gifted. How wonderful. Another person who says it affects everyone differently. Just because your neighbor's kid is nonverbal doesn't mean my kid can't talk or my friend's kid can't have a meaningful conversation. One kid's aversion to bright lights doesn't mean that all autistic kids hate the park. Isn't that true? Early on, I remember somebody who was hugging everybody else's kid at a party and did not hug my child. And my child was following them around like, this. And I said, could you please hug my child? I don't know why you didn't hug my child, but would you please? He's wanting you to hug him. He doesn't understand why you hugged him. Oh, I just assumed because, autistic kids don't like to be touched. And for my child, he would like it if you would hold him all the time. And I said, that's not all kids with autism. So some kids with autism, it's completely the opposite, that they'd like to be held all the time. And then they were like, oh, I had no idea. And I'm sure that there are people who know my child and know how much he wants to be held all the time. And he'll, he doesn't anymore, but he would crawl up into a stranger's lap to cuddle up with them. But I'm sure that there are probably people that go around hugging other people's children just because my child likes to be hugged, and for the children that find it aversive, it's not so good, right? Oh, they're all individuals, people. Okay, another person who says, I want the world to know that autism is not a superpower. Some have gifts just like the rest of the world, but don't come up to me and ask, so what is your child's special gift? Yes, we should be allowed to throw pies in people's faces that do that. Just, banana cream so that it tastes good. It's not really harming them, but just pie them in the face if they say something silly like that. They would learn quickly, right? Although it might be reinforcing for them if the pie tasted really good. Another person who says, I want everyone to respect autistic people. I am one of them. Very good. I want everyone to understand Asperger's syndrome. I am diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Okay, another person who says that kids that have it are normal kids with just a disorder. For parents to teach their kids to play with them and be nice, to not make fun of them or be afraid of them. Oh, yes. Another person who says how hard it can be sometimes. Somebody else who says, and just because some kids with it have special gifts like music or playing an instrument doesn't mean all of them can. Yeah, everybody thinks it's Rain Man, right? Another person who says, I watched my son try so hard to make friends with people out and about, and I watch to see how people treat him. He is a very large man, and it hurts so much to see how he is treated. They just don't know what they are missing with this very special man. Another person who says, I wish the world could be more patient and understanding. Wouldn't that be great? Even without autism, wouldn't that be great? Another person says, with patience, time, consistency, affection, and love, autistic children can and will exceed the boundaries of this disorder. Don't leave the teaching to the professionals. I had them teach me so I could teach my son. Very interesting. 2 years ago, 3-word vocabulary today, full and 2-part sentences with only 6 months. People who don't know him don't know he is autistic. I love my son. What a wonderful thing. You know, we talk all the time about how all of our children can progress. And it's important for us to learn to be strong members of the team. So good for that, Mom. Another person who says, if you know one child with autism, you know one child with autism, right? Okay, here's another person who says, staring at us is just like slapping. It still hurts. Wow. Good to know. That just because my son doesn't speak or understand, that doesn't mean you don't have to apologize to him when you do something wrong to him. I'm so sick of people treating him, that you don't have to. I was going to say, really? You don't want them to apologize? I missed a word in the sentence that was really important. Let's go back, shall we? That just because my son doesn't speak or understand, that doesn't mean you don't have to apologize to him when you do something wrong to him. I'm so sick of people treating him like he doesn't have feelings. People, family, have hurt him, and they not only don't apologize to him, but when it is brought up, they ignore it. He is a person and deserves respect, probably more so than those people. I would agree with you. Yeah, so I think people, you know, I was telling somebody something once about something that happened with my son, and I said, thank goodness he didn't realize what was happening, right? And so then, like 6 months later, something happened, and I was talking to this person about it, and they were like, oh, well, but, you know, he's oblivious to all that anyway. And I said, no, actually, you know, he's not. There are some things that he will miss, but he's not oblivious. His feelings do get hurt. And she said, oh, I just thought he, you know, totally had no, that's not the case. My daughter is autistic, and because of that, I have people tell me, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not. To me, she is perfect and always will be so. I don't want your pity. I want your understanding and acceptance. You know, it's always hard for me. I'll be honest with you that when a friend comes to me or somebody that I've just met comes to me and says that their child was just diagnosed, I am often at a loss for words. I'll just be honest with you that I don't, you know, there's a lot of things, but you can't start the conversation and say, okay, there's things you got to do, right? It's not the moment for that. There are feelings, and I always say to people, you know, I don't want to tell you that I'm sorry, but I want to tell you I'm sorry for all the pain you're currently going through, and that it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, I promise you. But you know, there is that thing about in the moment, you know, the go-to is I'm sorry. The truth of the matter is that I'm sorry for what they're feeling, because we all know in the beginning, you know, there's some acceptance and some grief and some anger, right? And I'm always sorry for people having to go through that phase. And I always like to remind people too that, well, now you know what you're looking at. Now you know the direction you need to go to get the help that your child deserves. It's not easy though, right? Another person who says that not all children with autism are the same. I'm just looking at some of the ones that I didn't read from yesterday of the what does your child need most right now? And somebody wrote more hours of ABA therapy. That's true for a lot of our kids. I've asked you guys to write in and tell me what's holding you back, what you think is holding you back. Try to identify what the problem is. If you're not getting ABA or not getting as much ABA, what's the biggest stumbling block for you? Is it just the finances? People always ask me this, and I think it's different for everybody. I really do. I think that finances are a big part of it, and we try to talk about that here as much as possible. And we can talk about it more, because I want to do what's going to help you guys to get the right amount of ABA. But I don't think it's, I think that's always a part of the equation, but sometimes I think it's, you know, people's work schedule or their family life, or where they live in relation to where the therapy can happen. So I would love to know from you what's holding you back, and then let's try to work on it together. That's of deep interest to me. I'm just checking one of the other sites. Hey, by the way, when you are on Facebook, if you go to Autism Live, we really appreciate your if you like us. That's what I'm trying to say. Trying to walk, talk, and chew gum at the same time, which I've never been good at. I'm somebody who can stumble over my own feet. All right, let's take a break. And there are many more responses, by the way, but we need to get back so that we can talk about the DSM4 and 5. And then at the top of the hour, we are going to be joined via Skype by Dr. Amy Kenzer. I've asked her specifically to come on the show and talk to us about toileting and how we can be effective and efficient in creating an environment in which our children can get toileting as easily as possible. If you have questions that are specific to toileting, now is a perfect time to be writing those in so that we can be ready for them when she's on Skype with us. So do that, and we will take a break and be back. Stick with us.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that, they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz. And once you pass that quiz, you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. There's been a lot of discussion in the last couple of months, since last November, about the changes that are about to happen in the criteria for diagnosing autism. Currently, in the United States, we have something called the DSM4. And it is the tool that is used. It's got the criteria that tells us whether a child qualifies for an autism diagnosis, whether they qualify for an Asperger diagnosis, or whether they're deemed PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, or as people like to call it, pediatrician didn't diagnose. It's a difficult thing, right? And so now we're about to, in 2013, have the DSM-5. And of course, there was a study that came out in November that suggested that they took a group of case studies from, I believe it was 1994, and put them next to the new criteria, the DSM-5, and said that half of those people would not have qualified for a diagnosis, which put a lot of fear into a lot of people's hearts. We've been talking to different experts about it. Some people were saying, you know, this is going to be an improvement, and others who are saying it's really going to be difficult. Well, we're now in the phase where they have published to the web the DSM-5 proposal changes, and they're taking comments only until June 15th. So I thought it was worthwhile today to talk about what the DSM-4 says, and then talk about what the DSM-5 says, and give you the opportunity to look at the two side by side and form your own opinion, and let them know if you disagree with a part or all of the DSM-5. But we got to have a reference point, right? So let's do a quick refresher on the DSM-4, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back and then do the DSM-5. So the qualifications for a diagnosis. There are, first of all, it's a total of 6 or more items from 1, 2, and 3. And we'll go over 1, 2, 3 in a second, with at least 2 symptoms from category 1 and 1 each from 2 and 3. I know. It sounds like you're in a Chinese restaurant and there's 3 columns and you get 2 from column A and 1 from column B and 1 from column C, and you can do whatever else, but it has to total up at least 6, right? It can be so confusing. So picture those 3 columns, right? And our first column, which we have to have at least 2 symptoms from currently to get an autism diagnosis, is a qualitative impairment in social integration as manifested by at least 2 of the following. All right, so think of this as the social area, and basically it lists a bunch of different things that can be social. A marked impairment in the use of multiple non-verbal behaviors such as eye-to-eye gaze, facial expression, body postures, and gestures to regulate social interaction. Failure to develop peer relationships appropriate to the development level. A lack of spontaneous seeking to share enjoyment, interests, or achievements with others, for example, by a lack of showing, bringing, or pointing objects of interest. A lack of social or emotional reciprocity. You know, when our kids are inappropriate their emotions to what's happening. So one child is crying and your child is either oblivious to it or laughing at it. That's a lack of emotional reciprocity. So not having empathy. That's all under the social. But the second one, so there have to be at least 2 from that one that we just went through. Now the second one is a qualitative impairment in communication as manifested by at least 1 of the following. So you had to have 2 from the social, but currently you only have to have 1 from the communication language one. A delay in or total lack of the development of spoken language not accompanied by an attempt to compensate through alternative modes of communication such as gesture or mime. So if the child is doing sign but not speaking, that's not going to count, right? Unless there is a delay in that language development in spoken language. In individuals with adequate speech, marked impairment in the ability to initiate or sustain conversation with others. A really important one that we don't talk enough about. Stereotyped and repetitive use of language or idiosyncratic language. These are the kids that do the movie talk, or they have echolali, you say something and they just repeat it. They're not communicating, you're just saying something over and over again. Lack of varied spontaneous make-believe play or social imitative play appropriate to developmental level. Now a lot of people over the years have looked at this one and said, why is this in the communication category? Why isn't this in the social? Well, that's part of what's going to change in the DSM-5. Okay, and then our last category, which is restricted, repetitive, and stereotype patterns of behavior, interests, and activities as manifested by at least one of the following. Encompassing preoccupation with one or more stereotyped and restricted patterns of interest that is abnormal either in intensity or focus. I know this one scares a lot of parents because they think, oh, my child is obsessed with Barney, or my child's obsessed with Buzz Lightyear. But if your child's able to do other things, it's probably not a full-on obsession. It's okay for children to be really passionate about something, but to the exclusion of everything else is when you got to be concerned, right? Apparent inflexibility, adherence to specific non-functional routines or rituals, that they've got to do it one way before they can go. This is the kids that you drive a different way and they have a meltdown in the car because they have to go down a certain path to get to the school. Really difficult thing to deal with. Stereotyped and repetitive motor mannerisms like hand flapping, toe walking, twisting, complex whole body movements, persistent preoccupation with parts of an object. These are the kids who look at the wheels of a car. This is my child taking apart the vacuum cleaner and every flashlight that we ever had. He had it apart within 35 seconds. He couldn't stand. He wanted it. It was easy to crack into. By the way, he wanted to crack into things that were difficult to get into, but they were too difficult. He didn't have the hand-eye coordination to do it. But a flashlight, boy, didn't stand a chance in our house. So we've got those three categories, right? You had to have 2 from the first one and at least 1 from the other 2, but you have to have altogether, a total of 6. So your child might have 4 from the social and 1 from the language and 1 from the repetitive and ritualistic. Or your child might have had 2 from the social and 3 from the language and 4 from the repetitive, right? It has to be at least 6, at least 1 in each category, but at least 2 from the social. That's the DSM-4. Now, that's not the only thing. We had A, B, and C, right? So not only do they have to have that, but they have to have delays or abnormal functioning in at least one of the following areas with onset prior to age 3 years. This has been a sticky wicket for a lot of kids. Social interaction, language as used in social communication, or symbolic or imaginative play. So at least one of those things by onset of 3. What we see a lot of the time that parents have been up in arms about is that their child was progressing fine. They got to 3 and there was a language delay that got diagnosed, right? But, maybe you had a little bit of speech and it seemed to be improving, and then the child gets to be around 6 and there are some very severe issues that start happening as more social demands are being put on this child. And, in some cases, they were having to argue and saying, but there was a speech delay, and it gets argued, and the child doesn't qualify for the diagnosis because it doesn't seem like these things were present and on board by 3, and you get into these big arguments. That's going to change in the DSM-5. Okay, our C column. The disturbance is not better accounted for by Rhett's disorder, our childhood disintegrative disorder, excuse me. Okay, so there is our DSM-4. Your child needs to have a total of 6, and it couldn't be explained away by some other disorder, and there had to have been some evidence of these things starting before age 3, which sometimes that was a hoop that parents could not get through. But again, you've got your 3 columns there. There's social, and then there's language, and then there's the repetitive and restrictive behaviors. So that's the DSM-4. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to reset my thing here so that we can talk. I don't have something as pretty as that, unfortunately, but so that we can talk about what happens with the DSM-5. Stick with us. Well, today we're going to be talking about how to teach children to recognize other people's emotions. Why is that important to teach kids with autism spectrum disorders?
Children with autism have difficulty recognizing other people's emotions, and we as people generally do things or don't do things based on how other people react. And so it's really important to teach our children how to recognize the emotions of others so that they know how to behave or not behave. And so it's really important too that they start to pick up on how other people feel, because it will determine should they continue acting a certain way around children in a play group, or should they do things to make their parents happy or other family members happy. So it's very important that they become aware and recognize what different emotions look like.
So how do we go about teaching it?
So basically, we generally start with trying to recognize other people's emotions by doing it through a photograph or in a book or through pictures, because that's something that's a lot more salient or easier to identify than a person that might be right in front of me, because maybe there's a lot of distractions going on, or that everybody's going to express their emotions in a different way. But then you want to make sure that you're taking the time to go into real life, pointing it out, whether it's contrived, for example. So I say, hey, you two over there, I want one of you to be happy, and then I'm going to ask the child to see if they can recognize that emotion, because maybe something else is going on that's also making them happy, like you handed them a present. You want to make sure then that you start fading away from the contrivedness of it, so as it's actually occurring in real life, because a lot of times our kids have difficulty generalizing, and just because you teach it from a photo, or I sit here and I say, how do you feel, doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to transfer the skill. It's one of the primary deficits of kids on the spectrum is generalization. So it's very important that we're teaching it at different levels, because ultimately everything that we are teaching them, we want them to be able to use in everyday life. So that eventually we even lead up to, hey, if somebody's on the playground being mean to you, how is that going to make you feel? And they might say, well, it's going to make me angry. Well, what can you do about that in that situation? And then also eventually teaching them, this is what you can say or do in that situation. But again, rehearsing that just in having a conversation is not necessarily going to mean that the child is going to start exhibiting that skill. So what I might do then is, for example, let's say we're going on the playground, and I know that it is in the past been a time that the child might get mad at somebody because maybe a child on the playground often always wants a turn. And so I might say to the child before we go on the playground, hey, if someone takes the ball away from you, what might you say or do? And so then I'm kind of priming them or coaching them before the situation occurs. That's still a prompt, but it's a step towards generalizing the skill into everyday life. But the goal then would be eventually that I don't have to remind them of that before the situation occurs. They will have the scenario occur to them and then immediately know the correct reaction or response that they need to give.
Right. And I can't say it enough. It builds on so many other things. Being able to recognize your own emotions, taking other people's perspectives, understanding where they're coming from. So a really worthwhile thing to work on.
And absolutely, and especially too because it emerges so early. But it continues to develop for quite a long period of time too. So yes, a lot of skills that build on from recognizing emotions of others and also your own emotions as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. So we just went through the DSM4, an explanation of what the criteria is currently to get an autism spectrum diagnosis. And you can see that there are some issues with the DSM-4. It's not perfect, right? And there are people whose children did not qualify for diagnosis on the DSM-4. So I think all of us had this hope, knowing that the DSM-5 was coming, that it was going to pick up some of those kids and make them eligible for services. Well, that's entirely possible. But of course, a study came out in November that suggested that a lot of our kids that are currently diagnosed with autism wouldn't meet the criteria on the new DSM-5. But there was a lot of speculation about it, and we personally, you and I, had not had an opportunity to look at it. We were just hearing from this study that this was a potential outcome. Well, now, as of this moment in time, you have the ability to go and look at the proposed changes. And you not only have the ability to look at them and read them, but you have the ability to comment and say whether you agree or you disagree. So there are a couple of different elements to this. We just went over the DSM-4, so now I'm not going to read you the whole of DSM-5, but I'm going to tell you where you can go to read it. You want to go to www.dsm5.org. Okay, if you go there, you'll see that there's across the top proposed changes, and you scroll down. We just went through, you don't want to know what, but it's under the neurodevelopmental tab there. Once you take a look at these, if you're ready to answer and say what your comments are on it, then you can send them an email at dsm5 at psych.org. And Emily will put that up for you. But really important that we weigh in. You know, if we don't say what our opinion is, then we can't be disappointed when it doesn't come out the way we want. So I want you to form your own opinions, though, right? We'll have experts in to talk about it, but I think it's really important for you to form your own opinions. So first of all, one of the biggest changes in the DSM-5, there's the email address when you know how you want to weigh in. One of the biggest changes that happens in the DSM-4, we had the 3 categories, right? We had social, and then we had the communication, and then we had the repetitive ritualistic behaviors. Well, in the DSM-5, what they do is take the first 2 categories and scrunch them together. So there are only 2 categories, and the first one, it says persistent deficits in social communication, and social interaction across contexts, not accounted for by general developmental delays, and manifest by all 3 of the following. So before we had to have 2 from 1 and 1 from 1 and 1 for a total of 6, they're taking 3 things, lumping them together, and saying you have to have all 3 of these in order to qualify. They're pretty specific in some ways and pretty broad in other ways. I don't know whether if it's useful for me to read these or not. You can read them on dsm5.org. You'll have to pull down the proposed changes. But I guess I'll just go for it and read them. So the first one is deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging from, so they're saying there's a spectrum here, ranging from abnormal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation through reduced sharing of interests. So a range there. Through reduced sharing of interests, emotions, and effect and response to total lack of initiation of social interaction. So it could be that it's just abnormal social interaction. It could be a reduced sharing of interests, emotions, and or it could be a total lack of initiation of social interaction. So you have to be somewhere on there, and if you're not, automatically you don't qualify. The second one, deficits in nonverbal communication behaviors used for social interactions, ranging from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication through abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of nonverbal communication to total lack of facial expression or gestures. So somebody who's completely, no gestures, no facial expression, to someone who's just showing poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication. So again, we get a spectrum, but you have to have some demonstrated lack of ability to qualify. It's not an either or. And the third one, deficits in developing and maintaining relationships appropriate to developmental level beyond those with caregivers. So maybe you have an appropriate relationship with a caregiver, but that you've got to show some sign of having and developing and maintaining relationships outside of caregivers, ranging from difficulties in adjusting behavior to suit different social contexts, through difficulties in sharing imaginative play and in making friends, to an apparent abscess or of interest in people altogether. So again, this range, if you're having difficulty with social context in a couple of places, to all the way to showing no interest in people whatsoever. But you've got to have all 3. Okay. again, they want to know what you think about this. And then the second category, because before we had 3 categories, now we just have the 2. So the first category now encompasses social and language, which a lot of people like. A lot of people are like, what happened? But a lot of people like it. Now, the second category is the restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities as manifested by at least 2 of the following. So there's 4 things and you have to have at least 2, but there's a new one on there that I think most people are thrilled about. Okay, so the first one is stereotyped or repetitive speech, motor movements, or use of objects. So whether the child's looking at the object or doing that echolalia movie talk, it's going to count in this one, such as motor stereotypies, echolalia, repetitive use of objects, or idiosyncratic phrases. Interesting that some of that got lumped in with repetitiveness. Okay, 2, excessive adherence to routines, ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior, or excessive resistance to change, that inflexibility that we saw in the other one, such as motoroic rituals, insistence on same route or food, repetitive questioning, or extreme distress at small changes. The third one, highly restrictive, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, very similar to the other one, such as strong attachment to or preoccupation with unusual objects, like my son with a vacuum cleaner, okay. Excessively circumscribed by perseverative interests. So when our kids are perseverating on something, they're just absolutely obsessed on it, right? And okay, here's the new one. Number 4, hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment, such as apparent indifference to pain, heat, or cold, adverse responses to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, fascination with lights or spinning. So they're saying hyper or hypo. So it may be that your child is not reactive to sensory things or that your child is overreactive to sensory things. This is brand new, that sensory things are part of the diagnosis. It's very, very interesting. A lot of people are excited about this. Some people not so much. Okay, so there you have A, B, and C, or A, B. Now we get to C. Symptoms must be present in early childhood. We had that on the last one, but they said it must you must be able to see it, onset of it, before the age of 3. Now they back off of that a little bit, says symptoms must be present in early childhood but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacity. So now we're making room for a child to, not that maybe we see signs of something going on, but it's functional at age 4, but at age 7 it's not anymore because the social demands make it no longer possible. A lot of people are thrilled about that one as well. And then D, symptoms together limit and impair everyday functioning. So again, a lot of people having difficulty with, is that, how are people going to qualify in terms of, are you going to have everything else and get disqualified on D? Also with this particular proposed change, they have a new criteria that puts things in 3 categories. And whether somebody is needing support, needing considerable support, or needing a great deal of support, right? And it was very interesting to me, and I encourage you to go on the site and tootle around and look at the different criteria in both categories, because you could need a lot of support in one category and need minimal support in another category. It was very interesting to me. I have to be honest, as I looked at it, I saw that my son still would have qualified for a diagnosis when he was almost 3, and that currently he would not qualify for a diagnosis, in my opinion, and that I don't think. Actually, I'm not 100% sure about that, because on the severity, on the repetitive behaviors, he wouldn't qualify, and he wouldn't need any support. I didn't think. I'm sure somebody else might think differently, but that on the language and communication, he would still need some support. So I don't know whether that would qualify him or not, where we would be, and whether he would lose what he currently has, the speech and the OT that he has. So I don't know how I feel, but I'm more concerned about how you feel. You can write in and tell us, but more importantly, have your voice be heard. Tell them. Write to DSM5 at psych.org. Tell them your opinion. There it is for you. Take a look at it. And see what you think about what it would change for you. And don't forget that it's not just about where your child is right now. Think about when you first started on this journey, because there's parents coming behind you that are coming, and they need for us to speak up as well. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have Dr. Amy Kenzer with us via Skype, talking with us about toileting. So stick with us.
New guidelines for autism could affect thousands of children nationwide.
It's estimated that about 1 in 110 kids have a form of autism. Dr. Doreen Granpiche from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders is here to explain the changes. She's joined by Nancy Alspa-Jackson, whose 10-year-old son, Wyatt, has autism. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Doctor, first, why don't you distinguish for us, because I think there are people out there that don't even know what the current guidelines are, and then quickly tell us what the new guidelines are.
Of course. Right now, there's 3 particular diagnoses: autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder. Pervasive developmental disorder is the milder form. Asperger's is sort of the form that doesn't include language delay, and autism is the pure form. Now what they've done with the new guidelines coming out in 2013 is they've joined all 3, and now it's called autism spectrum disorder. So that's one of the biggest changes. The other change, of course, is that within the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis itself, they now require you to have both the social delay and the communication delay, as well as a number of stereotypical repetitive behaviors in order to get it. And they've added a severity level, which we never had before, and that's, I think, very good.
And one of the important reasons for it to be diagnosed is there's a number of services available.
That's right.
But they're really not available in terms of state help or insurance help unless you're diagnosed, right?
Exactly right. And so this will make a huge difference for children with Asperger's who did not have access to those funds before, if they are severe enough to fit into this ASD category.
So Nancy, your son, of course, Wyatt, has autism.
Yes.
What do parents need to know that are watching today? How does this affect them?
Well, it affects the whole family.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really a disorder that affects everyone in the family. What parents need to know is that they need to get a diagnosis early, and they need to start treatment intensively. That's what concerns me about the changes, because if a child's not manifesting symptoms at, say, a year and a half, that they could, right, Doreen, potentially start regressing and showing symptoms at 2. Are we going to miss diagnosing a huge swath of children that are going to be left out? And we can't leave these kids out.
And actually, Nancy, that's a really good point, because the new diagnosis now specifically says that. It says that you may not see the symptoms evident at a very early age, but once demands are placed on the child in older age, you might start to see some of those symptoms.
Why were the changes implemented in the first place? Was it a cost-cutting measure?
No, that's a fantastic question as well. I think that a lot of people were questioning the diagnosis and saying, is the growth in the numbers, is the rise in autism due to poor diagnosis? I don't think people realize that the diagnostic criteria had been in place since 1997. There hadn't been a change for a long, long time.
So it was time for it to be updated.
It was, and I think I like the new criteria. I look at them and I think that it'll help us to become more specific about what each child needs.
Well, this is obviously a topic that we could talk about in depth, and we hope to maybe talk more about it in the future. We want to say thank you to both of you for coming in, and we wish you continued success with your son, Wyatt.
Thank you.
There's more information there for the Center for Autism.com, and there's a number there if you can call if you have questions, especially about these new guidelines. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. We're joined via Skype right now by the wonderful Dr. Amy Kenzer. Amy, are you there?
I'm here.
Wonderful. So great to see you today. Amy, tell the folks at home what your title is, what you do.
Well, I am a research and development manager, so I spend most of my time
working on projects within CARD that look at trying to maximize our treatment interventions for kids to make them as effective and efficient as possible, and make sure that we stay up to date on all the current research that's out there.
Wonderful. And effective and efficient, we talk about that all the time here because that's what we want to be as a parent. We want to be as effective and as efficient as possible. So I asked you to come today to talk specifically about toileting because we've had a lot of questions lately about toileting, and I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to get some information out there. So if you would talk to us a little bit about what are some of the things that we do before working on toileting. For instance, how do we know when to start working on toileting?
Right. Well, if you look at typical child development, awareness and the ability to kind of start toileting emerges around 2 years of age. And most kids, 98% of kids who are typically developing would be fully toilet trained by the age of 4. So you're looking at kind of a 2-year time frame that toileting typically happens. But we also know that kids with autism, about 50 to 70% have difficulty acquiring this skill. So we're looking at this age range when it tends to become easier to start to toilet, but it doesn't mean that it always happens within that time. Sometimes we have kids who are a little bit older when we're starting to toilet.
Okay, so we shouldn't be panicked if 4 has come and gone and we're not there yet, because can we, if let's say a child is 8 and has not yet successfully gotten toileting, is that too late? Is there ever a time that it's too late?
No, there's never a time that it's too late. And actually, I've had personal experience with teaching even adults who had been dependent on using, diapers or, incontinence underwear, and they've learned how to toilet as adults. So there's never really any, age that's too old to learn how to toilet.
Okay, great. Well, that's a great thing for us all to hear. But if we say that we're going to work on toileting, I'm sure that there are some things that we need to have in place before we actually get working. Are there prerequisites for somebody before we work on toileting?
Yeah, there are a couple of prerequisites. And then this doesn't mean that if your child isn't able to do these things, that they still can't gain more independence and start using the toilet. It just means if they have these skills, then they're going to be able to toilet even more independently without as much assistance from you. Okay. So ideally, your child would have the basic skills of dressing and undressing, being able to kind of pull their pants down and then pull their pants back up. After they've used the toilet. So that's kind of the real basic piece there. They need to be able to get onto the toilet. So some of our little guys, you might need to put a step stool in there. You might need to put one of those little cushy seats that sits right on top of the toilet seat in there as well, so that it kind of fits their size to make it easier for them to be able to climb up and climb down independently. And then the other thing you want to look for is them staying dry for an hour and a half to 2 hours at a time, or thinking about going, having to change the diaper, 10 times per day or less. Okay. You want them to be able to kind of hold that urination in for them to be successful at toileting.
Okay, interesting. And so it brings up, I know that you guys always like to take data. Yes. So if we're a parent and we're getting ready to toilet, we need to start keeping track of some stuff, right? We want to keep track of, you were saying, an hour and a half to 2 hours that they're going, that they can be dry. What other kinds of things would it be good for us to keep track of before we start toileting?
You also, if you're thinking about toileting, because a lot of times when we think about toileting, we focus on urinating in the toilet because it happens much more frequently throughout the day. But if you're also planning, and hopefully you are, to work on teaching defecating in the toilet, then you want to start taking some data several days in advance to find out when your child's most likely to do that. Is there a time of day when they tend to do that? Is there a location that they go to? Are there other kind of indicators? Do they hide behind the chair? Do they kind of squat down? Do they, get into a particular position? It's very common for kids to do that, to kind of indicate that they're going.
Yeah.
And taking data on that so you know what those are before you start trying to catch it and getting your child to the toilet.
Yeah, we call it a poop schedule in our house.
Yes.
The poop schedule. That taking a look at, and it may be that you already know that as a parent, but it may be that it just hasn't occurred to you because your day has been busy dealing with a bunch of other things. But really, as you were saying, beneficial to know. And then when I hear lots of different people talking about how they want to approach toileting. And there are some people who say, we're gonna go slowly, and other people will say, no, we're gonna set aside a weekend and we're gonna hit it hard. What do you recommend, Dr. Kenzer?
I recommend having the weekend and hitting it hard and having what's called a potty party. And, because the point is to make it really fun for your child, so that sitting on the toilet isn't something, like, oh man, I have to do this again, but something that they kind of look forward to, that's fun. They'll enjoy that time and also have a lot of practice opportunities in a really short amount of time. And that goes for not just toileting, but a lot of things that we're teaching our kids. If we have a lot of practice opportunities in a short amount of time, then they're going to learn it faster.
Yeah.
So if it takes 10 tries for your child to learn it, and you do 1 try per day, it's going to take you 10 days at the minimum. If it takes 10 tries and you do it 10 times in an hour, then they've learned in 1 hour. So kind of taking that perspective with toileting.
Okay. And we also, my son had, by the time we got to toileting, and he had just turned 3, but he found the bathroom aversive. So we had to go through a little bit of a precursor too, where we just made the bathroom an exciting place. It took about maybe 4 to 5 days beforehand, where every once in a while somebody would just yell potty and we would run into the bathroom and everybody would be dancing and singing as we went to the bathroom, and he thought that going to the potty was a party. Is that something that we want to do with all kids, or just if it's aversive, or just in individual cases with kids?
We want to do that with all kids. Before you start and you kind of put that expectation, like, okay, now you're going to have to come in here and do something different that you really don't know how to do, is make it fun. And if you have a child where the bathroom already is aversive, like you said, it might take a little bit longer. It might take a couple of days and really spending some time in the bathroom. Bring in a portable DVD player, bring in some games, play some music, have books, make it fun, dance around, and you might, if your child doesn't find it aversive, you might just be able to do that for a day or for a little while before you start trying to get them to go on the potty, but make it a fun place.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about, we're going to take it right down to the studs, as they say, about how we target urination in the toilet. So, if you guys have questions right now for Dr. Kenzer, this is a great time for you to send your questions in, but that's what we're going to do when we come back, so stick with us. Back in a few minutes. I'm here today with Sarah Cho, who is the Managing Supervisor of CARD Fresno. And she's a wonderful resource, and today we're going to be talking with her about using assisted technology.
If you are a parent of a child who is primarily nonvocal and maybe has been using a type of iconic communication system, and you are recognizing that your child has really just outgrown it, it is something. They need something faster. They need something better. There's so much more that we can do in the world of augmentative devices. I am a huge fan of using augmentative device programs on cell phones and also on iPads. As you and I were chatting, we had just downloaded a really simple tap-to-talk program. So for this one, all a child would need to be able to do is just tap on what they wanted.
I want a drink.
And then that immediately pulls up a screen where there's water, juice, milk, soda, and smoothie. So maybe the child just wanted to drink up their water.
Water, please.
And it's that simple. And there's not a lot to manipulate. The child does not have to have really advanced motor skills at all.
We're seeing more and more organizations advocating getting an iPad because of all those features. But it's not just for kids who are non-vocal.
We have a lot of kids, who have significant impairment in their sensory regulation. They really are seeking visual input, auditory input, tactile input, and if they're learning to appropriately play with a cell phone or with an iPad or with a computer, it provides those levels of appropriate sensory stimulation. So you're getting appropriate sensory, hopefully leading to a decrease in some of those repetitive behaviors, and you're teaching age-appropriate play skills. They have free apps, even if you're working on verb use, and the child can actually scroll through the different pictures and practice talking and narrating what they see in the pictures. There's just a lot of wonderful things that you can get from devices nowadays. Whether we're looking at language, social, play.
For my son, it's quite the social thing. When he sees somebody else who has one, he gravitates to them and they start playing together. It really starts the conversation with the other child.
What games do you have? What apps do you have? Can I play that one? Can I see it?
Yeah. And a lot of the apps are super inexpensive or free. Which is, you can't be free. Free is good.
You might have that initial investment in actually purchasing an appropriate device, but then a lot of the software or things that you need, are free or relatively inexpensive. There are also some really nice applications that might be a little bit more expensive, maybe like $20 or $30, or you can essentially download the entire, for example, PEC's icon library for just that little initial, investment.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our special guest right now is Dr. Amy Kenzer. She's joining us to talk about toileting. Before the break, we talked about some things to get ready for toileting so that you're prepared. Because I think, I don't know, Dr. Kenzer, I think it's as much about the parents being prepared as it is about the child being prepared. Am I right?
Absolutely. It's as much preparation and commitment. You have to be ready to kind of make that commitment and know that there are going to be accidents at first and be ready to kind of deal with those and commit to doing it for it to be successful.
And I love when people say, well, we're doing toileting, and they'll say, and we put aside the weekend for it, but next Wednesday we're flying out of town and going on vacation for 2 weeks. And I always think, okay, maybe the planning phase didn't get to the parenting brain. I'm guilty of the same thing. But we want to clear some time. We were talking about the weekend, but you got to have a little bit of time beyond the weekend. It's perhaps not the best week to fly away to Cancun.
Right, or know that if you are going to fly away, be prepared to still keep your child in underwear and take them to the bathroom on the airplane and do everything that you need to do in order for them to continue to be successful with toileting.
Yeah, and 7 changes of clothes in case of.
Yes.
But okay, let's assume that we've cleared our schedules for a while. We've done our prep work. The bathroom is a pleasant place for the child to be now. It's not aversive. And we're ready to start working. Do we want to work on urinating and defecation, pooping in the potty at the same time, or do we want to separate them out a little bit?
It's probably easier to focus on urinating first, just because you're going to have a lot more opportunities to be able to, teach your child what to do with that. But doesn't mean that if you don't, if you catch your child starting to have a bowel movement that you can't, bring them into the bathroom. It just means it's going to be easier if you focus on urinating and then take those skills and try to generalize them to the bowel movements.
Okay, great. So we're ready. It's the start of the weekend. What kinds of things do we want to do to get that success?
Step number 1, throw the diapers away.
Okay.
Step number 2,
so we're not doing the pull-ups then. We're totally
no.
Okay. Diapers
No,
gone.
we're not doing the pull-ups. We want to
Okay.
go straight to underwear because that's what we want our kids to be wearing is underwear. And we want that real sensation of if I have an accident and I go in my underwear, it's still nice and wet and uncomfortable versus if I go in a pull-up, it's pretty much like a diaper. And it's hard for our kids to know the difference.
Right. And I think there's something really reinforcing sometimes for some kids about the underwear, especially if you get the character underwear and help them pick it out. And it can be really reinforcing in and of itself. Not for all kids, but some kids. Okay. So we've tossed away the diapers. We're feeling that heady sense of I'm not spending any more money on this. And we put on the big kid underwear. And now what?
And you have some really big reinforcers that your child is motivated for because, again, this is something that's hard for them. It's a challenge. So you should be prepared to have that party when they do go on the potty.
Okay.
So it praise and big reinforcers and fun stuff. And then you go in the bathroom and you have them sit down on the potty. And you're going to start with them on the potty for an extended amount of time. You're going to do 20 to 30 minutes sitting on the potty.
Okay.
Now, if during that time they pee, then you have a party and they get off and they get to play for 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
After that time, if they still haven't gone, then you're still going to let them off the potty, let them stretch, let them move around. It's not that comfortable to sit there, for a long time. So kind of let them get up and move and play a little bit. And then after 5 to 10 minutes, back on the potty and trying again until they go. And it's also really important that there's a lot of motivation to go. So we have the reinforcers, but we also have a lot of liquids. So get their favorite drinks, get them salty snacks, and have them eating those salty snacks and drinking those drinks while they're sitting on the potty and hanging out in there so that they actually have, to go.
Okay. So, what a question I didn't ask before. Do you advocate the little toy potties or the big potty? Which one do you prefer? Does it not matter?
There's some amount of personal preference, what you want to do in your own home and the size of your child. If you have a really little guy, it might be more comfortable for those, little potties. But I would recommend using the cushy seat on the regular toilet.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. One, because then you don't have to then teach your child again, here's the new toilet that you should sit on instead of this other one. And two, it's a heck of a lot easier to clean up.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. Because you flush and you're done.
Yes, and you're done.
Yes, instead of having to take it and rinse it out and doing all of that.
Yeah, dump it, flush, rinse, clean, all that.
Yes.
So it can be harder.
Okay, so I'm really fascinated though because we're putting the child on the potty for 20 to 30 minutes, and we need to keep it reinforcing while they're there, right? So whatever that takes, and it's going to be different for different children.
Right. So something entertaining that they can do. If they like puzzles, bring in a puzzle. Look at books, listen to music, watch a movie. But make sure that when they do actually urinate in the toilet, that it's even more fun.
Yeah.
So they get to get off and they get to play with something. Maybe they get a special toy that they get to play with. Maybe they get, a special treat or snack. And they're getting all the praise from you, and it should just be literally you're throwing a party for them at that point.
Yeah, literally, we call it the potty party.
Potty party. Yes.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you do this for everybody or whether it was just for me, but as a parent, there was a timer, and it was for me and my husband, and we were given specific steps of, that you set it for this amount of time and that's how long the child stays on the potty. If they go, the timer, everything is off. But if they haven't gone and the timer goes off, that's when you get them off and you reset it for this exact amount of time.
Yes.
And then back to the potty for this amount of time. So there was no guesswork for us, and the timer went off. And we were my husband and I were the little Pavlovian dogs because the timer went off and we did things you know what? That was the part for me. I was saying this to you during the break that I felt like that was the errorless learning for me, the parent, because I get caught up in things, and I would have been having a conversation saying, oh, we could just wait another second. But that timer was the strict beginning and end of whatever phase we were in.
Right.
And I honestly think that that's what got us potty trained that quick, because it forced our consequences to be really specific for me. So do you do that for everybody, or is it just for parents who don't do well with time management?
I think it's helpful for everybody. everybody to use the timer because you're right, it keeps you on track. It tells you what you should be doing when, and it also helps our kids because then it's not some arbitrary, get back on the toilet time that mom or dad is implementing, but the timer beeps, it's really clear, now I get back on the toilet, or the timer beeps and I get off. And it makes it a lot easier. But the timer too, that first day you spend almost entirely in the bathroom. As you have your child be successful, so you have 3 successful urinations in the toilet, you start to increase the amount of time that they're off the toilet and reduce the amount of time that they're sitting on the toilet. And your goal is to end up so that they go and they sit on the toilet for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they're off for 30 minutes, and they're not having accidents in between those visits. And the timer is really helpful because once they spend more time off the toilet, it's easier for us as parents to get distracted and in doing other things and forget to take them back to the toilet. So the timer says, oh, time to go potty, we go back in there.
Yeah, and I think it's so ideal to be working with somebody else to help you set the timer things because I wouldn't have known what to set it to, but I know that there was a big period of time where I was saying this the other day that we would go 20 minutes. The timer was always set for 20 minutes. It would go off and everybody would go potty time, and we would go off to the bathroom, and he would be on the toilet for 5 minutes. If he didn't go, then he was off the toilet for 5 minutes, then on for 5 minutes, off until he went. But very quickly, we would go potty, we would go in, and he would go potty, and we'd do the yay, you went potty, and do the potty dance, and he would get something that was really reinforcing to him, and we would go back and reset it for 20 minutes. And that became, and the timer went with us when we were out. It went everywhere. And he potty trained like that. Was crazy good. So, but I wouldn't have known how to determine those different minutes. So hopefully everybody's got somebody who's helping them design the program, but what kinds of things determine how long and how fast do you change the time? How fast do you go from being 20, 30 minutes? Like, is it by 1 minute increments, or hard to say because you have to judge by the child?
You kind of have to judge by the child, but you can kind of go generally based on like a 5-minute increment. So, decreasing the sit time by 5 minutes. So going from 30 to 25 to 20 to 15 until you're down to 5. And what you're hoping for is that by the end of the day, or sometimes 2 days, if you have a weekend potty party, is your goal is that your child's sitting for 5 minutes, playing for 30 minutes in between, and that if you take them potty and they have to go, they actually go within the first minute of sitting down. And if they've gone, then you're kind of like you're in the safe zone. Usually you have a little bit more time before they're going to go again. Then if they haven't gone, then you might want to, like you said, jump back on after 5 minutes just to try to catch that time when they will need to go.
Yeah, but it's amazing that very quickly they get into a rhythm and they go. It's, you say you might keep them on for a maximum of 25 minutes, but most of the time you're not, because they'll go within the first few minutes, and that happens pretty quickly. Anything that we need to be aware of, like if we see that it's not happening, what kinds of things can we help ourselves? More drinks, more salty snacks?
Yes, really load them up on drinks, encourage the drinking as much as possible. If you have a really good drink that they like, usually that's easy, but if, they kind of get where they don't want to drink anymore, that's where the salty snacks come in. So their mouth gets dry and then they want to drink, and we keep going through this to keep them very well hydrated throughout the entire process.
Yeah. Which is actually a good thing for them to be well hydrated. And it does make it more likely for us to have the success. Okay, great. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the poop and the potty. It's the thing that it seems to be much harder for everybody, and it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more patience. So we're going to talk about that with Dr. Kenzer. If you've got questions, now's a great time to write in and ask. Of course, if you're watching this, a taped version, you can still ask your questions via email. We'll give that to you when we come back, the email address, because we know where Dr. Kenzer works, and we can get in touch with her if you have questions later on. Stick with us. Back in a minute. Hi, we're here with Sue Cho, and she holds a lot of different jobs and responsibilities at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're going to have her help us with learning about nonverbal imitation and how we teach it to our children. But first, Sue, what do you do at CARD?
I'm a senior clinical supervisor, so I supervise children's cases. I'm also with the training department and provide training to the supervisors, people that are becoming supervisors or current supervisors. And then I also provide workshop services for children all over the world when they don't have access to a CARD site.
Great.
Nonverbal imitation is being able to copy the actions of another person.
You can do nonverbal imitation. What can you then go on to do?
Just about everything, because when people are social beings and we learn what to do by observing other people. When we look at children learning how to play, they are copying things that are going on in their everyday lives.
So how do we go about teaching this?
So when we first teach it, you want to start off at the most concrete level, which is copying the use of an object. You can actually touch it, you can feel it, you can see it. So for example, picking up a telephone. The child has their phone, I have my phone, and I would just pick it up and say, do this, and then the child has to copy by picking up the phone and just putting it up to their ear.
And if they don't do it,
then I would assist them. So I would first show them, do this, and then I would put it in their hand and then hold it up to their ear.
And praise them for when they do that.
And then we also want to make sure too that they're not putting the phone up to their ear when I've asked them to do something else. To start, we're just going to have the phones out, and the only thing that they can pick up is the phone. Then eventually I want to get to the point where I put other things out as well, and that they then realize that even with all these other things out, they're still able to pick up the phone when I pick up the phone. The focus of this lesson is that they observe what I do and then they copy what I did. Then we teach other items too, because we want to teach them to do multiple objects and also eventually doing multiple things with an item. So for example, let's say initially I'm teaching them to pick it up and just hold it up to their head. Maybe I also want them to understand that, oh, you dial the phone. So I might say, do this, and the child picks it up and then pretends to dial. And then eventually we start putting the actions together so they have more of a multiple sequence of activities going on so that we can teach them how to play. So for example, if I have a car, I might teach them that, okay, I'm going to start up the car. Vroom, vroom. The child imitates the sound if they have the capability of doing that. Then I'd say, okay, we're going to roll it over to the store so we both park. And then, okay, now I'm going to crash into the wall. And the child crashes into the wall so that we're able to teach multiple step sequences.
Okay. And it sounds like, again, key is getting preferred items to do this with and making it fun.
Yes.
Most
definitely.
Not making it boring.
Yes, we want to make it interesting for the child because then they're more likely to attend and want to do it.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And our special guest right now is Dr. Amy Kenzer. She's been joining us, talking to us about toileting. We talked about how to get ourselves ready, how to know when to start toileting, how to take on urinating in the potty. And now we're going to do the big pooping in the potty. If if these kinds of conversations are not for you, then this is not the segment to watch, right? But for those of us, it's a real part of our lives. Having our child be able to poop in the potty, it's one of those things. I think it's a big self-esteem boost for the parents and an even bigger one for the children. When they get it, they tend to be really excited about it, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to teach, right, Dr. Kenzer?
Right. Well, it's harder because you just don't have as many opportunities. It's normal for a child to only have one bowel movement a day or one bowel movement in a couple of days. And so that limits your opportunities to kind of work on it.
Okay, and it literally takes longer, so you can be feeding a child. When you give a child lots of drinks, it's not going to take that long to work its way through. Where you give them a lot of food, and it's going to different speeds. So you mentioned before to kind of keep track of before you start, to have an idea of when does your child poop, what do they do, what kind of behaviors do they engage in when they do poop. So if you have an idea of when they poop and what kinds of things that they do right before they poop, what can you do with this now that you're ready to go for the poop in the potty?
Right. Well, now that you're ready to do that, you've already been practicing urinating. So that kind of process of sitting on the potty for a while, making it fun, and then taking breaks or, getting off and providing a party when they do go, you're going to use those same strategies for defecating in the toilet, but you're not going to spend all day there because they're not going to go many times in a day. Instead, you're going to try to pick those times you've identified as really likely for them to need to go and start then. So if you know that they always go, within the half hour before bedtime, then you're going to start sitting on the potty during that time to try to capture it. And just like we said, salty foods and have drinks for urinating, there are some things we can do to make it easier and more predictable for defecating. So you give them a lot of high fiber foods. The liquids are going to help move it through the system better as well. If you think your child has difficulty having a bowel movement, if your child's constipated, you definitely want to talk to the pediatrician before you start trying to work on toileting, because you want to make sure that you make that as easy as possible for your child. And your pediatrician might recommend a stool softener or something else that can help them be more regular and make it more comfortable when they go.
Although the water also will help with that too. Yes, that when you're doing all the urination training and you're applying them with water, sometimes that kind of makes the whole thing function a little bit better. So, but important to be able, if you are having issues, and I would imagine it's the other way too, that if you're having loose stools, might be something to look at with a doctor as well.
Exactly. And before you start trying to train, to go on the potty so that they have better control and it's not as aversive for them to go on the toilet too.
And I feel like with the first one, it's a little bit, it seems like it's hit and miss, and it's about being vigilant, trying to catch it so that you can give the reinforcement for the first one.
Yes, and then making sure your reinforcement is very powerful so that your child's motivated to do it again.
Yeah, and I think so important that as parents that we not only have the reinforcement in mind, but that it's there physically so that we can give it immediately.
Yes.
That was something that we were talking about the other day, that, if you have to go buy something and have it there in advance, that's not the time to go to the store and be hunting for the thing at 2 o'clock in the morning. To have it right there so that you can give it immediately. Dr. Tarbox was saying the other day that for some kids that saying, if you go if you go poop in the potty, we will go for an ice cream cone at McDonald's right now. But he was saying how important it is to make sure that that you know that the McDonald's is open and that the child poops in the potty, and you have your car keys in hand and you leave right then. Because as parents, sometimes we're like, well, we'll go in 5 minutes. It's not going to reinforce it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what else do we need to know for pooping in the potty? It's basically the same kind of thing, or is there anything else that we need to know for the pooping in the potty?
Well, the comfort on the toilet becomes much more of an issue for pooping on the potty. So that step stool where they can put their feet on it does really become important, because if you think about the difference between urinating and pooping on the potty, with urinating, they simply need to relax. With pooping on the potty, sometimes they need to kind of, push. And that's going to be hard to do if they're holding themselves up on the toilet to keep from falling in, because now their body's not relaxed. And if their feet are dangling and they don't kind of have anything solid to put them on. So we want them to be really comfortable, have that potty seat that fits their bottom so they can relax, and something to put their feet on. And it can help too to give them those reminders and model for them, like pushing, that pressure on their tummy, leaning forward, all of those different physical prompts to help make it easier for them to go.
Okay, what about the kids that for whatever reason they're peeing in the potty, but they're nervous about pooping in the potty because there's a splash, or we see some kids that it's like they feel like they're losing a part of themselves. What kinds of things do we do to help them to know that it's not that there's nothing aversive about pooping in the potty, that it's really a relief, or do we just try to make it so overwhelming that we catch it?
We try to make it one really, really fun, again, to be in the potty.
Okay.
Sometimes if you have a kid who is really struggling with this, we might start with, and they're asking for the pull-up or they're wanting their diaper back on so they can go. Is sometimes if we're not kind of able to get success without the diaper, is we will do, diaper on sitting on the toilet.
Okay.
And kind of get that relationship between I go poop on the toilet, and then we can slowly remove the diaper, or, I've done in the past where we've cut holes in the pull-up so that they still have that comfort of it feeling like it's on, but it's actually going into the toilet.
Very interesting.
And that can be really helpful too. And the key is eventually getting all of that diaper or pull-up off, and they're going on the potty.
Wow.
That's not as common to have to do that, but, it helps sometimes.
Okay. So now let's take a second to talk about nighttime and what happens with potty training with both of these things, with peeing and with poop at nighttime. I mentioned to you during the break that I hate to admit this because people hate me when I do, but I did not have this problem with my child. He came out of the womb and did not want to do anything while he was asleep. I don't know why. I got incredibly lucky. So I honestly don't know, and I hear parents talk all the time about this. It's just the hardest thing in the world. So what can you tell them to help them?
Well, first, just a reminder that with physical development, regular physical development, is that the nighttime continence follows behind the daytime continence. So, it's not uncommon for your child to be successful during the day and still have accidents at night. So initially, you might still be putting the diaper or the pull-up on only at nighttime.
Okay.
But once you start to get some times where they're dry during the night, or you think they're old enough and ready to move forward with, toileting during the night, one is real easy. Make sure you limit the drinks before bedtime. So just like before we were saying load them up on drinks, now we're saying stop 2 hours before bedtime, limit that drink. 2, make sure they go right before they go to bed. They use the toilet and they pee. And then once they're in bed, if they, if they wake up in the morning and they're dry, big party.
Yeah.
If your child tends to have accidents during the night, it can be really helpful to set your alarm. I know this doesn't sound fun for parents. But
it's a lot more fun than doing the sheets, Amy. It's a lot more fun than having to do laundry.
Yes, it is. I totally agree. Because if they have the accident, you're still probably getting up at night.
Exactly.
So set your alarm, catch your child in the middle of the night, take them to the bathroom, have them go, and then put them back in bed.
Okay.
And again, you're trying to keep, it to a minimum. You're not talking to them. You're not, waking them up, keeping them pretty, sleepy, but going into the bathroom, using the toilet, and getting back in bed. And if you do that on a regular basis, you set your alarm for the same time each night, that kind of helps your child. They will learn to kind of wake during that time and go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's great. And, I hear this from some parents that it becomes such an issue that there are some kids, and then they get older and still haven't gotten the toilet training, that they're reaching into the diaper and taking the poop at night, and not only just pooping in the diaper, but they're smearing. What kinds of things can you tell us for that? Because that's not fun.
No, that's no fun. I think it's the same kind of strategies. Is if that happens during the night, it makes for a couple of nights where you don't sleep so much. So hopefully you plan accordingly and take some time to sleep during the day. But again, trying to figure out when that tends to happen. Does it happen early in the night? Does it happen in the middle of the night? Or does it happen near the morning? And trying to capture the time that they go and catch them and have them go to the potty. Is if you can get them and they can go in the potty, then you prevent that, kind of play altogether.
Right, because there's something that's reinforcing about that, and if we make pooping in the potty more reinforcing, we can hopefully turn that around, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Are there any pitfalls in particular across all of the different things that we've talked about that parents should be aware of and know so that that they don't have a problem later on with toileting?
Right. Well, I think the number one thing is to get rid of those diapers.
Okay.
It's really going to make it more difficult for your child and for you in the long run with more accidents if you switch between diapers. If you think, oh, we're going to go out, to Little Gym now, and so I'm going to put him in a pull-up because I don't want him to have an accident when he's out there playing.
Right.
Or we're going to go to the park and there's not a bathroom there, so I'm going to put him in a diaper.
Yeah.
That can really set your child back and make it much more difficult, and you'll have more accidents in the long run. You just have to be prepared to clean it up. So I've been there with my own daughter in Wendy's, in the booth, and there's just pee everywhere.
Yeah.
And people are pretty understanding. Clean it up, they'll come and spray it down, and you change the clothes and move on. And you'll have some of those will happen. It's inevitable. But in the long run, your child will learn how to toilet much more quickly.
Okay. And then tell me, and because I know you got to go, but tell me just a little bit in terms of generalization, because one of the things that we hear a lot is that people say, oh, well, my child toileted and they're able to do it at home, but we can't do it at school, and we can't do it at the park, and we can't do it at the store. When do we want to start having them poop and pee in other toilets? How far into toilet training do we want to start to do that to send the message that we do this in other places, not just at home?
Right. I would start that pretty quickly. So that first day, your potty party, you're going to probably pick a bathroom that has space and is fun and convenient, and you can stay in there, and that's fine. But you want to make sure that after that first day, when you've got more time out of the bathroom, when you take them potty, you go to the different potties in the house so they can go on all the potties in the house. If you have cousins or aunts or grandparents' house, head over there, spend some time, let them know you're practicing potty, use those bathrooms. Out in public, going in the bathroom and checking them out, even if they don't need to go or it's not time for them to go, just going in there and, again, making it fun, too.
Yeah.
Have a little potty dance in the bathroom at Target before he ever needs to go in there to use the toilet can help as well. But pretty early on, you want to start using a variety of toilets.
Okay, very good. We had a little song that we would do, too, that he enjoyed. I shouldn't share this. My son is not going to be happy when he's 18. But
No, he's not.
We would set him on the toilet, because sometimes it took him a little while to relax. And so I would say, ready, aim, and then I would say, fire, and then I would start to sing the song, the disco song, fire. I'm not going to sing.
Yeah.
But anyway, and do a little dance, and that was, he knew, it was time to let go and go, which I got to tell you, when we would go out places and be on a different potty, it distracted him from all the different things that were going on, reminded him that, that it was sort of a cue and that he knew to go right then, so we got to it quicker. Different things for different kids. But Dr. Kenzer, this has been so wonderful. We so enjoyed it, and we learned so much. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back again. Well,
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, you have a great day, the rest of your day. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back to close out the show. Stick with us.
When Maddie was diagnosed, I'll be honest, I was very ignorant on what autism was. I knew that autism was basically something that hit boys at the age of 2 to 3. They shut down, and sometimes you think of the typical Rain Man movie. And with Maddie, she was doing all the same signs and symptoms of a typical child with autism spectrum disorder.
Stand up. She didn't even acknowledge us coming into the room. She had barely any eye contact. She didn't interact with her sisters. She didn't really do anything. She just basically lined up her toys, and that was about it. We have a team of 7 volunteers, or 8 now. We have 8 volunteers, including my husband and I. And I'm the team leader, and so I do all the curriculum and get everything ready each week.
Jana was downstairs until 11 o'clock at night working on curriculum, going through 2 different textbooks. And then we, as a group, meet on Monday nights, and we would go through what the curriculum was from Jana. And a lot of times we would go, well, how exactly do you do that? How do you sit her at the table and do this trial base? What Skills has done for us, it's taken that away from Jana trying to figure out the curriculum for one. She can go down, or even our laptop, and she can sit down, and through all these questions, it comes up with the different programs.
at least for me, it was a relief off my shoulders. I was worried that I might be missing something, missing a curriculum that maybe she needs to know, where skills, they have every possible thing your child needs to know from 0 to 7. They have a program for that.
What noise is this?
Good job!
Every program that we did with her, I knew it was specific for what she needed to learn. Because before skills, it was a lot of, okay, well, is that really age appropriate for a 2-year-old? You know, because it's not generalized. It's anywhere from 0 to 7. This is what your child needs to know, and in most manuals you'll find. But for this, okay, yep, she should be learning this. And no, she's not 4 yet. She doesn't need to know that yet.
We are so fortunate that Jana was able to attend a conference put on by CARD that opened the door for skills, and that there's no looking back for us.
We started using the program in November. It seemed like by January something just clicked, and she has completely kind of came out of her fog that she was in for quite a while.
I have never read a documented case on any child that has not benefited anything from applied behavior analysis, and now with this new skills and being, you know, like the E version of ABA, I can't imagine it doing anything harmful to their child. It's nothing but exponential growth for us.
To see her now, it just blows us away. I mean, we call her our little miracle child because in 7 months' time, she's just blossomed into this normal, functioning child, and suddenly, we joke about it all the time, like suddenly we have twins.
If you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Because the absolute worst thing you can do is do nothing at all. And even if you use this program and it's just a single mom or a single dad working in the evenings with their child, this program is going to benefit them. It's going to show you where they are, it's going to show you where they need to go, and it's going to show you what skills and how to get there. It is an online book on how to help recover your child.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We had a couple of more responses to the question of the day that I wanted to share with you. Our question of the day was, what do you wish the world knew about autism? And somebody wrote in and said, I agree, understanding and acceptance. People need to stop being so judgmental. My son is so loving and sweet and deserves friends just like anyone else. And another person who said that just because my daughter has difficulties with being social doesn't mean that she doesn't want friends. She actually loves being around people. And that's the case with a lot of our kids. I wanted to share those two in particular, and also wanted to go back, because we kind of rushed through it a little bit, for when we were talking about the DSM5, there is an open comment period until June 15th. Once June 15th comes and goes, we don't have the ability to comment anymore. This is the period of time we've been waiting for. You have the opportunity right now to go in and look at not what everybody else has been postulating, but what actually the proposed changes are. I really recommend that you do go and look at them. You can go to www.dsm5.org. You're going to want to go to the proposed changes. It'll be a drop-down menu. Go to the, why can't I think what it was? I'm having a senior moment. Thank you, Emily. The neurological one, it's right at the top there, and then you can choose between a bunch of the different things you're going to want to pick on. Autism disorder, and you can take a look at that. Then when you're ready to comment, you can go to dsm5@psych.org, and there it is right there, and leave them a detailed message about how you feel that this would have affected your child, how you feel it'll affect your child right now. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back, and we're going to finish out the show. Stick with us.
I'm Joe Montaigne. As a father of a daughter with autism, I know the challenges that brings. Military families impacted by autism wage a battle on two fronts. One for their country, and another for their children.
I know your God knows we're in a battle zone. Well, I'm fighting the war back here, and I'm fighting it all alone.
With 1 in 88 military children diagnosed with autism, the families face extraordinary challenges. But there is hope. With intensive treatment, the lives of children with autism and their families can be changed. You can make a difference.
We've all been waiting for.
To learn how you can help a military child with autism, go to acttodayformilitaryfamilies.org. Thank you.
Maybe tomorrow.
Welcome back. We just saw a promotional piece for Autism Care and Treatment Today and their initiative for military families, so important. Their executive director, Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson, is with us regularly on Wednesdays during the 11 o'clock hour. She co-hosts with me while we do Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. So that's tomorrow. And our special guest tomorrow during that segment is special education attorney Valerie Vanneman. So if you have questions, and I know you do, I know you do, are of a legal nature having to do with special education, please take advantage, because Valerie's going to be with us answering our questions, but she could be answering your questions. Wouldn't you like some free legal advice? Here it is for you. I keep saying, what do you need? What do you need? Take advantage of it. And you can be sending those questions into us right now. Lots of different ways to participate. I know that your day is full and you've got all kinds of things to do, but if you can get some free help and some free support, I hope that you'll take advantage of it. All it requires is sending us an email. Speaking of which, because we're getting close to the end of the show, well, I'll do that in a second. I love to take a moment to do what I call just parent to parent. This is the part of the show where we let everything else go. We talked a lot about toileting today. We talked about some other things. I said, I'd love it if you'd look at how much sugar your child is having to see whether it's a problem or not. It may not be a problem for you, but if it is, you might want to start slowly diminishing the amount of sugar that your child has. But whenever we talk about things, believe me, I know firsthand how easy it is to get overwhelmed. I still get overwhelmed and my child is doing so well. I think, oh my gosh, all the things I got to do, or all the things I could do, right? I think it's really important for us to look at each day as a new opportunity and say, what can I do today? And to count that as whatever it is enough. And when you're saying, what can I do today, taking into account all the different things that are going on today, that you might be underslept. We have EOs too, establishing operations, which make it less likely for us to be successful at different things on different days, right? And to not expect too much from yourself. I'm sort of starting to learn to simplify, and seeing that I enjoy myself more if I simplify. I always think I got to be on this treadmill and I got to accomplish more. And the truth of the matter is that when I do that, I don't get as much done as when I say, I'm just going to clear the decks and here's what we're going to do today. And that may be all we get done today, but that's what we're going to do. It's so much... there's so much to do, right? We have so much to do to help our kids. But when we introduce things here on the show and talk about things that are potential, like you may not be in a place where you're ready to do toileting. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. What I wanted you to hear more than anything else is that it doesn't matter how old your child is, toileting can start and you can be successful. I love it when we get BCBAs in here and I say, is there ever anybody that you couldn't toilet train? And the answer is no. Okay. So if your child is 15 and you haven't gotten to it before, you know what? You were doing other things. It's okay. We need to stop judging each other, but we need to stop judging ourselves, right? You've been doing your level best that you could under the circumstances that you did with what you knew versus what you didn't know. You're doing okay. So let's not worry about what happened last week or last year or last decade, right? What can you do today? What's really capable? What are you capable of today? What's really feasible that wouldn't be overwhelming? What could you do and be happy and joyous doing it today? If there's one thing you can cross off your list today or one thing you can start, that's enough. That's way enough. Because heaven knows you got a lot other stuff to deal with, right? And we don't want to just be piling it on. So whatever it is today, just ask yourself the question, what can I do today? What could I actually work on today? And when you're ready, you'll know when you're ready to do the potty training. And I really do think, it's a little bit when the child is ready, but I think more than anything, it's when the parent is ready. And I got to tell you, when you are ready and it happens, it'll be worth it. It's going to be a bit of time to, that's going to be frustrating and messy. I used to watch those shows where they would talk about, they would swab the theater seat and they would swab the handle of the cart and they would find human feces all over the place. And I used to think, who are the poopers? Who are the people who are going around and pooping on everything? Why can't they contain themselves? Are they not washing their hands afterwards? And then, of course, I had a child and I realized, they should be able to put it through something and tell the age of who the poopers are, because more often than not, they're children. And there's a certain amount of poop that happens, right? So, when you're doing the toileting, it's going to get messy. And it does, whether your child's on the spectrum or not. We just get into acceptance mode, do what you have to do to get through it. Because when you get to the other side, oh my goodness, it's happy and it's exciting for you. It's less expensive for you because you're not having to invest in the diapers in the way that you had to. And there's that self-esteem for the child, something that they can do. And I think it really pushes everybody up and makes everybody more willing to take on more difficult things, because you realize, progress is possible. And for the people who say, oh, well, some of our kids don't make much progress, they just get toileting, well, I say, to them, because toileting's huge. Toileting is absolutely huge. That should not be underestimated ever. Okay. I said I would remind you of ways that you could tell us if you have questions. So here, Emily's going to start to show some of the different ways. You can be emailing us. We love that when you do that. We respond back to you via email, and we'll cover it on the next available show. You can be calling in. Even when we're not live, you can call in, leave your question. You can actually probably get your question answered by somebody on the phone, but we'll also cover it on the live show, the next live show. You can Skype in. That's a wonderful thing to do. We were just Skyping with Dr. Kenzer, and you can see how easy that was. Facebook, talk to us on Facebook. We absolutely love that. And you can also be tweeting to us. Don't forget to be watching us in all the different ways that you can. On Blip TV, you can be watching us on YouTube. We're a free download on iTunes. Gotta love that, right? Very soon you'll be able to download just the audio portion. So if you want to take us walking or in the car, you'll be able to do that. And we are now on Ustream. So we're very appreciative to Ustream for having us on their site as well. If there's a way that you'd like to be able to see us that you currently can't, please let us know. If there's a topic that you want us to cover that we just don't spend enough time on, or something you want us to be more specific about it, I always like to say that I gave up mind reading to be an autism mom, so I unfortunately I do not have the ability to read your mind, but if you tell me, I'll work on it. We really appreciate it when you guys participate with us, because it's reinforcing for us, and we think that it's a way we can all hold hands on this journey through autism. Want to remind you, Evelyn Gould's going to be with us tomorrow, and she's going to be talking about something really remarkable for parents, a newer type of therapy that helps us. So you gotta love that. And then we're gonna have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy at 11 o'clock. So you won't wanna miss that. The show starts at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from us. Bye-bye for now.